hottest debates. Do you
Okay,
not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Good afternoon, wonderful people. It's me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. And coming up, Christmas in chaos as Mick Lynch's RMT announces a fresh round of strikes. So do ambulance workers. Should migrants entering the UK illegally be made to wear ankle tags so we can track them? And are you one of the millions of people struggling to get a GP appointment? They're walking out for Christmas. Is it morally justified, though? Thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff will strike on December the 21st and the 28th in a row, predominantly over pay. On top of that, Mick Grinch is living up to his name by announcing even more rail strikes from Christmas Eve until the 27th. I want to know how this is going to affect your Christmas plans. I'll speak to one of the unions behind the ambulance strikes, and that is coming very, very shortly. Also this hour, though, a big one, I think. Should asylum seekers who enter the UK illegally be made to wear ankle tags? Remarkably, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer actually thinks this might be a good idea. They'll be monitored via satellite. I will ask, is putting tags on migrants ethical? And a stark warning now, as 5 million people are being denied a GP's appointment every month, apparently. This means people aren't getting things treated, and we are all becoming sicker as a result. Let me know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. A couple of the big ones there. Are you going to be affected by the strikes on the railways over the Christmas period? Do you think it's morally OK for ambulance workers to go on strike? And do you think the people who enter this country illegally should be tagged? GBviews at gbnews.uk. But before that, it's your latest news.
Good afternoon to you. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. A man's been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by King Charles in Luton. Bedfordshire police say the suspect, in his 20s, was arrested in St George's Square after an egg was believed to have been thrown in the direction of the monarch. The incident took place in Luton town centre, where the King had been meeting community leaders and voluntary organisations at the town hall. He was seen being guided away from crowds by his security team following the incident. Thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff are going to strike on the 21st and the 28th of December in a dispute over pay. 3 unions, GMB, Unison and Unite, this afternoon announced the industrial action across England and Wales. The GMB union says 10,000 ambulance staff, that includes paramedics, emergency care assistants and call handlers, will walk out. In a joint statement, the unions accused the government of ignoring pleas for a decent wage rise. The national lead officer at Unite, the union, One Kassab, says patient lives are being put at risk because of staffing shortages.
Only 25% of shifts have the planned staff actually on that shift. There are 133,000 vacancies across the NHS in England alone. And what our members are telling us is that lives are being put at risk now and that people are dying now because of the state of the service.
We have reached out to the government for a response. As soon as we get it, we'll bring it to you here on GB News. Let's move on now. And Baroness Mone is going to take a leave of absence from the House of Lords following allegations that she benefited from a COVID PPE deal. It's alleged that Michelle Mone and her children received millions of pounds after she recommended a company to government ministers at the height of the pandemic to produce PPE. Baroness Mone has denied the allegations. Well, that move means she will not attend sittings in the House, vote on any proceedings, and won't be able to claim any allowance. The Health Secretary has told the House of Commons there's an earlier peak in Strep A cases than usual, but sought to reassure parents and said there is no new strain. At least 9 children have died from the bacterial infection in the UK since September. The latest is a 5-year-old from Belfast. The government says antibiotics could be given to children at schools affected by Strep A infections as a preventative measure. NHS Dr Veena Babu is urging parents to be on the lookout for symptoms.
If you're a parent with a young child, look up the symptoms, have a look at Google images of what the skin rashes look like, have the information at your fingertips. If you can't get hold of your GP, there's 111. Most practices have either e-consults, text messages, telephone calls. Worst case scenario when your child is unwell, of course, take them to A&E and the paediatric department will help. So I think as parents, you need to empower yourself with the information and act quickly.
England's rugby head coach, Eddie Jones, has been sacked after 7 years in the job. The Rugby Football Union says he has the highest win ratio of any previous England head coach. Under his leadership, the England team took 3 Six Nation titles, had an unbeaten run of 18 matches, and they got to the final of the 2019 World Cup in Japan. This season, though, has been England's worst performance since 2008. His former number 2, current Leicester Director of Rugby, Steve Borthwick, has been tipped to replace him. The National Farmers Union is urging the government to support primary producers to avoid a food supply crisis. The union's warning farmers are under strain from rising fuel, fertiliser and feed costs and says, as well as egg shortages, other foods could be impacted too. Well, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs insists the UK has a high degree of food security. Protests have broken out in Indonesia after the state passed a new law making sex outside of marriage a criminal offence. The new code also bans cohabitation between unmarried couples and applies to Indonesian citizens and foreign tourists. Breaking the new law carries a punishment of up to 1 year in jail. There are concerns it could deter tourists to the majority Muslim country, with the Deputy Chief of Indonesia's Tourism Board saying it's totally counterproductive when the economy is recovering from the pandemic. You're up to date now on GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. An eclectic mix for you today. Thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff are to strike now on December the 21st in a dispute over pay. Paramedics, emergency care assistants, call handlers and other staff will also walk out on December the 28th. So December the 21st and December the 28th, the big ones for you. Bear in mind, we're apparently going to have nurses on the 15th and the 20th as well. They're arguing that the government has left them with no choice but to take action in what they describe as a last-ditch attempt to, quote, save the NHS. I know there's a lot of strong views on that, one way or the other. Striking in order to save the NHS, will that not lead to higher backlogs? What about the moral issues about all of that? Andy Prendergast is the National Secretary of the GMB union, which is one of the unions that has voted to strike. I will be talking to another union representative very shortly. Here's what he had to say, though.
We are going to be meeting trusts on an individual basis. We are going to be agreeing emergency cover, but the reality is an ambulance dispute like this is going to have an impact. We will do what we can to make sure the most needful cases are covered, but it will have an impact on the public.
Yes, so I will be speaking to a representative of the Unison Union, which is another one that represents the ambulance workers. It does include paramedics, emergency care workers and 999 call handlers. How do you feel about all of this? Apparently, anyway, they were offered a 4% pay rise. I'm intrigued to know whether their members had a vote on that and what the percentage of people who actually voted to strike were. 10,000 people supposedly now going to walk out of their jobs the 21st and the 28th of December. Mick Lynch, though, in another strike Armageddon story, continues his mission to steal Christmas as further rail strikes have been announced for the festive period. Ministers have urged the RMT boss not to, quote, hold the country to ransom. It's our first proper free Christmas for a while, isn't it? Whilst the government has been training troops to firefight and drive ambulances as part of preparations for the mass worker walkouts ahead. Certainly when it comes to the rail strikes, I want to know how it's going to be affecting you, if it's going to be affecting you. One would imagine even if you were planning on driving home for Christmas, then that might have some form of an impact because the roads would be chocker. The ambulance one, I think, for us today is probably the big one. It's the most breaking news line when it comes to the strikes and also arguably the one that contains the most moral issues, the 21st and 28th of December. What do you make of that? Bear in mind as well, it'll come fresh off the back of a nurses' strike. Let's talk now to GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is in Westminster for us. Darren, look, thank you very, very much. Now, what has the political, easy for me to say, the political response been to all of this? Because people are pinning it on the government, saying you should have done more to negotiate with them.
Yeah, indeed. So the government say all these strikes are damaging, they're counterproductive, they're going to damage. And the reason, Patrick, they would argue, the Conservatives, that they can't cave in, if you like, to these double-digit pay rises in various sectors, is that would end up being self-defeating. It would fuel the very issue at the heart of all of this, inflation. As for the Labour Party, they clearly blame the government, saying that they should intervene in all of this, that they're being extremist, if you like, in not taking the side of these ordinary workers up and down the country that are going to go on strike. And caught in the middle is you and I and everyone else in the country that's potentially going to face disruption, whether it's on the railways, whether it's in the postal services, teachers, nurses, ambulance drivers, airline baggage haulers, handlers, sorry, I could go on and on. It really does feel like the winter of discontent. Now, there are many in Parliament feeling the government do need to get a grip of all of this. It's not been discussed in the Commons today. Apparently it wasn't discussed at Cabinet this morning either, even though it is the biggest political issue of the day. Many feeling the government need to get a backbone, really, and decide to stand up to the unions. Been much talk, hasn't there, in recent weeks and months. It was in the 2019 manifesto. Liz Truss was committed to it. It's already started its legislative process through Parliament. This idea of a fixed level of provision during strikes, i.e. that you need to provide a minimal level of service. It's not going to deal with the next couple of strikes in the next couple of weeks, Patrick, but many feel it could help in the future. In the end, though, what is the government doing to sort all of this out? Many feel, as I say, that they need to either stand up to the unions, get involved, tucked into these negotiations. But in the end, it's quite tricky. And the big question for the Conservative Party ultimately is, who is the public going to blame? Are they going to blame the unions for the disruption, or are they going to blame the government?
Yeah, Darren, thank you very much. So our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, there is in Westminster, and I think Darren's just hit the nail on the head there when it comes to who are the public going to blame, because it is really about the optics. And I think initially, anyway, people were a bit more on the side of the strikers. It's a mixed bag, and it's important to say that there are different issues when it comes to each different strike. There are so many of them, it's hard to pick through. But when it comes to rail workers, OK, all right, one would assume that if they go on strike, people won't necessarily die as a result of that. Their job isn't always life and death. It's a massive inconvenience for people. And there are different issues when it comes to recruiting rail workers as it does to nurses, for example, or ambulance workers, paramedics, emergency care staff, 999 call handlers. Now, when it comes to those ones, and that's the latest round today, which is I think a bit more concerned about getting your views on, as the ambulance strikes are announced for the 21st and the 28th of December. 10,000 workers, basically right across England, Wales actually, are going to be walking out on those days. There are significantly more, for me anyway, moral concerns when it comes to that. And hopefully very shortly I'm going to be speaking to a representative of one of their unions anyway, Unison. It'll be interesting to see how they square that. The moral issue there, the percentage of people who voted for that strike, because sometimes those figures are a bit squiffy. It can make it sound as though they've all voted for it. But I think, I'm getting emails in on this as well, for example. people saying they already can't get a GP's appointment, and that's something we're going to be touching on later today. We know we have around 7 million people on an NHS waiting list. Apparently, 1 in 7 people can't get a GP's appointment as things stand. You add that to the nurses' strike and the ambulance misery as well, and before you know it, you don't really have a fully functioning or indeed a functioning NHS, do you? So I want your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get them coming in thick and fast. But thousands of ambulance and NHS staff, as I've just been talking about, will be going on strike on those 2 dates, the 21st and the 28th of December. Supposedly a very mooted response from government, really. They appear to not be discussing it around the cabinet table. They certainly don't appear to be discussing it in the House of Commons. One would imagine it's going to be a biggie at PMQs tomorrow. But Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting has raised concerns with the Health Secretary Steve Barclay earlier today. We can have a quick look at their exchange.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The chairman of the Conservative Party claims that NHS strikes are exactly what Vladimir Putin wants. So why isn't the Health Secretary negotiating to prevent them from going ahead?
Well, I've seen him make this claim across the media a number of times, just to reassure the honourable gentleman, the right honourable gentleman. My door is open. I've been very clear with the trade unions. I'm available to see them this afternoon or tomorrow. It is not me, Mr. Speaker, that set a precondition on those talks. So there's a number of issues when I met with the trade unions that they've raised, not only pay, but around safety of staff and other conditions, the estate, tech and so forth. And I'm very happy to engage with the trade unions on those points.
Well, just on that, very shortly, fingers crossed, we are going to be speaking to a representative from one of those trade unions. I'm keen to put your views to them, and indeed a good one here is coming from Richie, and I'm expecting you to see a bit more of this. Initially, I think there was a lot more support for these strikes, but I think as we start to stare down the barrel of them, especially over a busy winter period when people arguably are going to be most at need, certainly from a health sector, Richie said nurses, doctors, ambulance crews, firemen, all emergency workers should be like the police, not allowed to strike. He says that any person who dies because of the strike should be able to contact the union directly and seek claims. He goes on to say things like manslaughter, etc. Obviously, there may well end up being legal claims there, but we'll have to wait and see. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Do you agree with Richie, who thinks that people who do go on strike in our public sector should actually be banned from doing that? Should they be banned from going on strike? A little bit later on, we're going to be talking, well, more about that. Also, a big one for us today, ladies and gents, is about whether or not you think that we should be putting ankle tags on people who come to this country illegally. That idea apparently is being backed by Keir Starmer. Do you back that? It might help us to keep tabs on some of these people. It might make you feel a bit safer if you're in an area with a migrant hotel. Moral concerns, though, again, with that one. What do you think about that? Is it immoral to put an ankle tag on someone who's entered this country illegally? gbviews@gbnews.uk. But we're moving away from that now. It's something that just happened, well, moments ago, really. A man in his 20s has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by the King in Luton town centre in Bedfordshire. That's according to police. That's after an egg is believed to have been thrown in the direction of the monarch. GB News' reporter, royal reporter no less, Cameron Walker, is with me now. Cameron, this egg thing seems to be becoming a theme, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. It's the second instance in no less than a month, to be perfectly honest. Today's instance in Luton involved one egg, as we understand it.
Just the one?
Just the one, instead of 4, which is what happened in York about a month ago. It was a relatively small instance. My point being, the King was very quickly moved on by his security team, who clearly rushed at him when the egg was thrown, and he was guided away from the crowd very subtly and then was moved to another area of the town square in Luton where they were to greet other members of the crowd, i.e. away from the incident. So, to be honest, the people on the ground hardly knew that it had happened until these alerts started going off. As you said, a man in his 20s has been arrested. But clearly, Patrick, this is the second instance in a month, as I said.
Yeah.
The King would like to do walkabouts, as we see him do, greeting members of the public, trying to be personable with as many as possible. But clearly, from a security perspective, that does leave him open to be a target.
Yeah.
And luckily, it's only eggs this time, but of course there is always the concern that it would be something else.
Well, absolutely, and it is slightly self-defeating because I think most people want the royal family to be as visible as possible and to be amongst the public as much as possible. I'm sure the King does, but if it becomes practically difficult, and like you've said as well, I mean, they can't be putting him in danger, can they? And if this is becoming a regular thing, I understand that the last chap who lobbed an egg at the King was banned from carrying eggs in public again, which just seemed like a rather bizarre response. But we'll have to wait and see how this one unfolds. But I take it no real massive line from the royal family yet on this?
No, Buckingham Palace will not comment. They didn't last time. I'd be surprised if they did this time.
Cameron, thank you very, very much, as always. Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter. He'll keep you up to date, indeed. Well, yes, apparently with that egg incident, obviously the security staff were scrambled rather quickly and they said it's no yolk. No? I'm here all week. Anyway, right, OK, look, coming up. Matters more serious, in a sense. Millions of people are struggling to get GP appointments, and as a result, some patients will not have serious medical conditions diagnosed until it's too late. Apparently, 5 million people were struggling to get GP appointments in the last month alone, which is a shockingly high number, isn't it? That's the warning from the Labour Party. Are we once again letting patients down? And find out why the care sector is furious with the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. The release of his book, well, it's happened, hasn't it now? And yeah, he does appear to be putting the blame for massive amounts of care home deaths during the coronavirus crisis on staff there, and I'm not sure really whether or not that's justified. Well, I'm pretty sure it isn't really justified, is it? He said there was a ring of steel or whatever, wasn't there, around care homes? That clearly wasn't true. We're also going to be asking you, as indeed the emails have been flooding in thick and fast, gbviews@gbnews.uk, whether or not you think it's the right policy to be putting tags on people who enter this country illegally so we can keep tabs on them. But before all of that, let's take a quick look at your weather.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Yes, OK, well, it's difficult to know exactly where to start, isn't it, when there's so many different strikes taking place all at once and so many issues wrapped in amongst that as well. I'm going to focus in very, very shortly on the actual problems when it comes to getting a GP appointment. Apparently 5 million people last month alone couldn't get a GP appointment when they wanted one. That's up 2 million on the same time last year, which is pretty remarkable, isn't it? Supposedly, anyway, we have 4,600 fewer GPs than we did in 2013. The government wanted to recruit 6,000 by, well, not far off net from now, actually. That's not happening, is it? But lots of problems with this, loads of you getting in touch about this, and I think on this show I always say, oh, come on, email in, and then quite often I don't end up going to loads of your emails, and I do cop that. So we're going to do that now. gbviews@gbnews.uk, and this is a good one from Sandy. Start as you mean to go on, Sandy. If you need a GP appointment, I suggest you go to France and come back in a dinghy. There we go. Lots of more of you have been getting in touch, though, as well. Anne says, and this is in relation to the nurses' strike and the ambulance workers' strike and other NHS workers who are going on strike, which ties into the GP topic, doesn't it? Anne says, nurses, ambulance workers, other NHS staff who strike should question if they are in the right job, if they think it is their right to put lives of others at risk who are in their care. Jonathan says, until 2 weeks ago, the Transport Secretary was more interested in bashing unions and their members for the last 6 months than trying to settle this. They were confrontational, threatening, disrespectful and still trying to underfund the railway for the problems that they, the Tories, created in the industry. When will they take responsibility? And amongst those two emails there, I think we almost hit all of the issues. I know that one's on rails and one's on health, but the two are interlinked, namely because they're all going on strike. But the nurses one and the ambulance workers one has much more moral connotations, as far as I'm concerned anyway, than the rail strikers one. The rail striker one, very annoying, OK? Very annoying, and I'm sure it's massively disruptive, and it will cost our economy supposedly around £30 million a day for each day that they're on strike. But the cost of life, potentially, is more than the cost to the public purse when it comes to the health workers going on strike. And I've noticed a real shift in tone, actually. It's a bit of a fluctuation from when initially people were saying, well, nurses, they do a great job, they're all angels and we should go outside and clap them every single day again. Yeah, OK, fine, I do think they deserve a bit of a pay rise. But now we're staring down the barrel of almost a slightly general NHS strike with ambulance workers as well. I've noticed a bit of a shift in public opinion going towards the fact of, well, actually, patients will suffer. And are they in the right job? Should they have maybe thought about this? Inflation was unprecedented, and that's really what's causing the cost of living crisis. We're all in a similar boat, are we? But Jonathan's point there, which is that maybe the government could have done more to see this coming and stop this coming with better negotiations earlier. That's Jonathan's view. David says one of the major legal firms should be encouraged to offer to represent all those who suffer financial loss or health issues. Yes, by bringing class actions to sue the promoters and organisers of the strike with a combined loss. This would bankrupt the union leaders and organisers. Yeah, it goes on there. But actually, that's a really interesting point, because I interview various different legal representatives almost every day on this show. And, David, that's a cracking point, because I've asked them a few times and I've not really been able to get a particularly straight answer, probably because they don't know until it happens. But my concern is, let's say you are... well, hopefully this doesn't happen to you, obviously. Let's say you take ill and you need an ambulance, or let's say you are in hospital even, and the nurses' strike or the ambulance strike directly impacts your health. Does that mean, or you die, fingers crossed again, double fingers crossed that doesn't happen, does that then mean that you or your relatives can maybe sue for medical negligence? And the jury is out on that, for want of a better phrase. But, David, I'll do my best to try to answer that for you over the course of this show. Your views, keep them coming in. How do you feel now about the morality of an ambulance worker strike? Supposedly 10,000 walking out on the 21st and the 28th. Keep these views coming in. Loads of other talking points for us today, especially when it comes to whether or not we should put ankle tags on illegal migrants who have come here. A lot of you in favour of that, shock horror. But I'm going to stick with the medical theme for now, because the latest GP appointment figures have revealed that more than 5 million people like you, were unable to book appointments in the month of October. Now, the findings, it's important to say these are by the Labour Party, but still, show that 13.8% of people did not get an appointment the last time they tried to book one, with the number of failed appointments having doubled since last year. As ever, there are layers to this catastrophe, and to pick through them is Dr. Shirin Lakhani, who's a private health specialist. Look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. First things first, public health in this country. Are the public right to think that GPs aren't working hard enough?
I think that's not the case at all. I think the problem is that we don't have enough GPs in the country. We don't have enough healthcare workers in general. We've had a lot of people leave the profession as well due to the working conditions. particularly after the pandemic and the stress caused by that. The government haven't met their promises of providing more GPs. They promised an extra 6,000. They've already said they're not going to meet that target. And demand for healthcare has gone up as well. So it's a perfect storm, really.
Yeah, I understand that. Again, just reading some of these facts and figures, obviously public health is massively affected. People who, let's say, can't get a GP's appointment are then maybe getting more sick and putting more of a burden on the NHS. But when we're looking at strikes, for example, with NHS workers or hospital porters or paramedics, 999 call handlers, it's interesting that the care worker sector doesn't appear to be striking. They were absolutely battered during the pandemic. I know GPs aren't striking, but what is so unattractive about being a GP when you compare it to other elements of the medical profession?
It's not just unattractive about being a GP, but there are a lot of pressures on them. They're the first port of call for the public when they need medical assistance. There's immense workload for GPs. There's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy, and their funding's been cut as well, so they can't actually meet the demand that's needed from them.
Just on that, sorry, I'm just reading here. It says the most common reasons that patients were unable to secure a GP appointment were because practices were not allowing them to book too far in advance. That doesn't appear to be red tape. That appears to be the fault of practice. And then you read headlines. I was doing a piece on this earlier on last week, I think it was, about GPs wanting to just work 9 to 5 and not weekends. Is that red tape?
Well, you're looking at working conditions, and at the moment, GPs don't work 9 to 5. They work much longer hours.
But they want to, don't they?
Working at weekends. There are on-call centres. So the issue we have is that there isn't enough GPs to meet the workload. There aren't enough appointments available. The reason that people aren't being able to book appointments far in advance is because of the high DNA rates that occur when these appointments are booked that far in advance. And the GPs need to deal with what's urgent. So it just makes it really, really difficult all round.
OK, so how do we solve the recruitment crisis for GPs then? Because every single other aspect of the NHS walkouts appear to be around pay. I would imagine that the general public would have a lot less sympathy for GPs when it comes to pay than they would for, say, a staff nurse. Is that how we sort it? More money?
It's not just a question of more money. There is a lot of other things around it. So the workload is far too high at the moment. The number of patients that GPs have to look after per head is just ridiculous, just because of the shortage there is in GPs and also other practice staff. It's the same throughout the NHS. It's poor working conditions, poor retention of staff. Not enough of them.
Just quickly, look, absolutely. I take exactly what you've said there, but I would be probably not doing my job if I didn't ask you this question. I've just read out your title that's been given to me here, which is Private Health Specialist. And one of the big concerns for a lot of people is, well, my GP is only available a few days a week, then they go and coin it in the private sector. Do you do that?
I'm not a private GP. I actually work in a very specific field in the private sector.
Do a lot of GPs do that? Is that
a lot of GPs... I can't say. There are a lot of people who were previously in the NHS who have left the NHS to work in the private sector for various reasons, and poor working conditions is probably the biggest one.
I think, because I think that's what a lot of people struggle to get their head around. Patients, struggle to get their head around. If people go and, start working in the NHS, maybe use that as a bit of a leg up and then get into the private sector. Some people maybe think there's something a bit rum about that. I don't know. But, hey, there we go. Dr. Shirin Lakhani, thank you very much, private health specialist. And that's just picking through the latest figures there, that apparently 5 million people were unable to get a GP's appointment last month alone. The Department of Health and Social Care has responded to the claims, which is that basically people obviously can't get treated, saying this analysis is inaccurate. There we go. This survey was published in July this year using indicative data, and since then it's been confirmed there are 36 million appointments carried out in October, a 5.3% increase on the same time last year. We are improving access to general practice so everyone who needs an appointment can get one within 2 weeks, including by recruiting more support staff and rolling out state-of-the-art telephone systems to make it easier to get through to surgery. So Well, there's an interesting rebuttal, that, isn't it, really, considering the fact that, yes, all right, this research was supposedly carried out, apparently anyway, by the Labour Party. Does appear to be pretty damning. 5 million people, apparently, in October were not able to get an appointment, and it would appear then that the government is just saying that's categorically untrue. I think, as with all of this, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, isn't it? But anyway, there you go. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, I'll be asking if it's ethical to put ankle tracking tags on migrants who enter the UK illegally, given the fact that we're seeing reports of various people absconding, given free rein when it comes to them being at hotels, etc. Would it make you feel safer? Do you think it would? The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says there's a case for making some asylum seekers wear electronic tags that would keep track of their movements by satellite. That's an interesting one, isn't it, actually? I'm going to nail my colours to the mast there. I'm in favour of that, I think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But anyway, find out why the care sector is furious with the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, after the release of his book looking back at the handling of the pandemic. Yeah, find out why. But first, here's your latest news headlines.
It's 33 minutes past 3. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. A man has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by King Charles in Luton. Bedfordshire police say the suspect, aged in his 20s, was arrested in St George's Square after an egg was believed to have been thrown in the direction of the monarch. The incident took place in Luton town centre, where the King had been meeting community leaders and voluntary organisations. He was seen being guided away from crowds by his security team following the incident. Thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff will strike on the 21st and the 28th of December in a dispute over pay. 3 unions, GMB, Unison and Unite, announced the industrial action across England and Wales. GMB says 10,000 ambulance staff, including paramedics and call handlers, will walk out. In a joint statement, the unions accused the government of ignoring pleas for a decent wage rise. Baroness Monet is taking a leave of absence from the House of Lords following allegations that she benefited from a COVID PPE deal. It's alleged that Michelle Monet and her children received millions of pounds after she recommended a company to government ministers at the height of the pandemic. Baroness Monet has denied those allegations. The decision means she will not attend sittings of the House, vote on any proceedings, and won't be able to claim an allowance. The Health Secretary has told the House of Commons we are seeing an earlier peak in Strep A cases than usual, but there is no new strain. At least 9 children have died from the bacterial infection in the UK since September. The latest is a 5-year-old from Belfast. The government says antibiotics could be given to children at schools affected by Strep A infections as a preventative measure. And England's rugby head coach, Eddie Jones, has been sacked after 7 years in the job. Under his leadership, England won 3 Six Nations titles and got to the final of the 2019 World Cup in Japan. However, this season has been England's worst performance since 2008. His former number 2, Leicester's director of rugby, Steve Bothwick, has been tipped to replace him. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News, the People's Channel. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, a big one for you. We always cover what's been going on in the channel and the ongoing crisis when it comes to the migrant hotels, etc., and public health and safety. But is there a solution? The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says that he supports tracking asylum seekers with GPS tags in some particular cases. Well, earlier this year, the government rolled out electronic tagging for some migrants who are facing deportation. The move's been decried by a number of charities, classic. But speaking this morning, the leader of the opposition said the use of these trackers was appropriate while claims were still being processed. So, is this the right way to keep track of asylum seekers in the UK? I know many of you, and certainly myself as well, have serious concerns about the numbers of these people who may be absconding, about the kind of trades that they might be getting involved with when they do abscond as well. Joining me now to discuss this is former Met Police officer Peter Blexley. Peter, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Right, ankle tags for people who enter this country illegally. Good or bad idea?
It's a good idea for anybody who enters this country and is applying to live here permanently, undoubtedly. But I would make these tags entirely different from the tags that we see people who have committed crime and are on probation or early release from prison. I would have these tags manufactured in the colour of the Union flag, all the way round, OK? So when the sun's out and people are wearing shorts and somebody is walking through a park and you see this tag, we would know that that is somebody who is applying to live in this country, wants to be here, and we can then differentiate from somebody who might have one of the standard tags on, who may be on early release from prison and clearly has committed crime.
And do you think there are any ethical or moral views when it comes to putting a tag on someone who's waiting to be accepted or otherwise into this country?
If you want to come to this flagship democracy, to raise your children in our free education system, to enjoy the benefits of the NHS, however long you might have to wait for, our roads, our infrastructure, and a whole lot more, then actually, in the flags of the Union, in the colours of the Union flag, I think you should be more than willing to wear a tag, because it shows that you are going through a process to become a contributing member of our great nation. If not, and you don't want to wear it, then turn turtle and, quite frankly, leave.
Yeah, well, I'm inclined to agree with you. And I know a lot of people in areas, well, now it's right across the country where there are these migrant hotels, have got serious concerns. And indeed, yesterday we covered one where there was a hotel around the Morecambe area. They were given 15 hours notice to local council that 80 asylum seekers are going to be housed there. And one of the local councillors came out and he said, if these hotels keep popping up, conflict between the, quote, indigenous population, as it were, and these people is inevitable because of the sheer numbers and because of public fear. Ankle tags could do a lot to actually kind of nullify that a bit, couldn't they? Because people, I think, would feel safer knowing that this person was tracked.
And these people would already be wearing the Union flag. It would be a sign of allegiance to this great country that they're proud to wear it while they wait for the interview process to be completed. And they're not going to go getting in trouble, surely, because if they do, then they need to be arrested and their rights revoked, and quite frankly, they have to leave the country.
I'm waiting for the morning that I wake up to a report from the Home Office or an FOI request that's revealed how many people have absconded, especially how many missing children there are. Are you concerned that that's already happened?
Of course, there were recent reports of a number of children that have gone missing from the system, and they are inevitably going to be vulnerable, and I would suggest they quite possibly are going to become victims of crime. Now, quite frankly, we also don't know, because there have been previous examples of people that were wanted in other countries coming to the UK, and that was only discovered later on, and then they get deported to the countries where they are wanted, often for very serious crimes. And of course, who picks up the pieces of people that enter the country wanted elsewhere or determined to commit crime in the UK? It is our overworked and underpaid police service. And quite frankly, it is creating a burden. Some people are creating a burden for the police. Not all, of course, I would never contend that. But some are adding to the already enormous workload that the British police have.
Look, there's a migrant hotel right near where I live, and when I get the train into work every single day, I usually see some people who are from that hotel on there. The reason I know that, for a fact, before anyone jumps down my throat on this, is that there are regularly issues when it comes to the tickets, etc. So you see it happening before your eyes. And these people are obviously on their way into London. If I was here and I knew that I had a pretty spurious asylum claim at best and probably was going to get rejected and didn't fancy living in a hotel for however long before I was deported, if indeed I was ever deported, then I probably would disappear into the ether in London as well. So I think these tags are probably a good idea, but some charities have described it as psychological torture. Do you buy that?
It should be a flagged tag of honour because you are waiting to become a member of this flagship democracy. Anybody who wants to stay in this country and contribute should happily wear that flagged tag, saying to people as I can, it's a great conversation starter. Yes, I'm in the system. I'm waiting for my interview. If I'm allowed in, can I study where you study? Do you know anybody that's got a job vacancy? I want to contribute. And therefore, it will take away stigma. It could quite literally be a tag of honour almost.
And the tags that some people are getting in touch with me now saying, well, they'll just cut them off. But presumably there are defence mechanisms against that for ankle tags.
Absolutely, they are. They're not tamper-proof, but they report tampering. Right. And so the minute you do that, well, then I'm very sorry, you're not in the queue. No. Actually, you're in a different queue, and that is to leave the country. Yeah,
fair enough, Peter. Thank you very much. Always enjoy our chats. Good stuff, that. Peter Blexley, who is, well, he's a former top cop, isn't he? There we go. Well, look, some charities, as I said, have described the move as psychological torture. It's kicked off in the inbox about this. The vast majority of you appear to be in support of the idea that we should be tagging people who enter this country illegally so we can keep tabs on them. It would, in my view anyway, be common sense. And what about that? Peter Blexley's fantastic solution there, which is why not give them a tag that has got the Union Jack colours on so you can differentiate from them and a criminal that you might see walking around with a tag, frankly. And also, it's a good conversation starter. Integration starts with a tag. Who would have thunk it? Anyway, moving on. Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has been accused of rewriting history as he launches his new book on the UK's response to COVID. The diary has caused anger after blaming care home staff for spreading the virus to vulnerable people during the first stage of the pandemic. Well, a huge number of elderly people did die as a result of the infection spreading into care home facilities. But one of Hancock's diary entries suggests there was scandalous behaviour of some care home bosses, whom he says allowed employees infected with COVID to work. Let's speak now to Joyce Pinfield, who's the Vice Chair of the National Care Association. Joyce, it's great to have you on the show, and thank you very much. When I talk a lot about striking workers, I get a lot of emails in saying if anyone has a right to strike, it's probably the care home workers, and they don't appear to be doing it. So you do appear to already be deeply popular when it comes to our views. So how do you react to Matt Hancock's claims that the reason why COVID ripped through care homes and caused tens of thousands of deaths was down to care home workers themselves?
We are absolutely outraged that Matt Hancock has been saying this. He's not learned any lessons at all. When we went into the pandemic, we were already realising that this was going to be something that would affect us and our vulnerable residents. So many care homes did already lock down prior to the government locking down the country. And so our workers then had to work through, we were told, protect the NHS. So we were bringing people from hospitals who didn't need acute treatment. They were coming into care homes untested. So they were bringing the virus with them. And this is well acknowledged, apart from by Matt Hancock and the government, it appears. So we are truly outraged by this. Our care workers were stressed out. They were working day and out, trying to protect their residents. There was no testing happening in care homes to begin with, and indeed we could not even get PPE. I am a care provider, and I know the trials and tribulations we had just trying to get PPE for our staff. It was an absolute nightmare. It was all being channeled through to the NHS. We were clapping for the NHS, but the social care workers were just forgotten. And there is no lessons learned from that and no acknowledgement still of all the great things that social care staff did during that time.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are a lot of people who say that COVID was an unprecedented situation. It was, and there was a huge amount of chaos, and everyone understands that. And I think everyone with the right mind would accept a certain degree of mistake amongst that chaos. There was a period of time where I genuinely thought maybe the world was going to end. There was about a 2-week period, I think, right at the start where it looked that way. But one of the areas I think people are not forgiving of is what happened in care homes, namely a lot of the time because people were denied the right to see their very ill relatives for a long period of time, especially maybe ones with dementia and Alzheimer's, who I think found it possibly particularly difficult to get their heads around what was going on, if indeed they ever could. But was there actually the case where people who weren't previously at those original care homes, so almost just like random people really, were being sent from hospitals into care homes? So they weren't even your own care home residents. Did that ever happen?
Oh, yes, this is where the problem was. In trying to protect the NHS, care homes were taking people directly from hospitals who were not our original residents, just purely to try and free up beds in the NHS.
Were you being told that these people didn't have COVID?
There was no testing going on. We were just told, please help out the NHS. We need to free up these beds that are being blocked by people who do not need acute care needs.
And presumably,
so they were coming into the community settings, which care homes are. And so they weren't tested. And then we were discovering gradually that these people possibly did have COVID. And then, of course, it was spreading through because we were not being able to test and we could not get the PPE. If we could have got the PPE, that would have helped. Care homes, of course, have always been well versed in doing infection control measures through norovirus, winter flu, or other protection issues like that. And of course, when we have had norovirus in the past, we have had to close down our care homes to visiting relatives, not only to protect our relatives, but to protect the visitors and their families. And so it was quite something that we had been used to doing due to those diseases. It was just a dreadful problem that the lockdown did go on much longer.
Just very briefly, I've appreciated this conversation, Joyce. Just very briefly, when it comes to Matt Hancock himself, the cynic in me would say anyone who keeps a political diary during a national global health crisis, who's making decisions on that, presumably was doing it because he had plans to sell that diary one day, as indeed he's doing, which I think speaks volumes possibly about Matt Hancock's state of mind. There's something incredibly morbid and pretty narcissistic about that, actually. I find that quite disgusting. His book is on sale, I believe. What would you say to anyone who's thinking about buying it?
I naturally would say don't buy it, because if he is trying to publish his diaries without any reflections on where things went wrong, without any apologies to any sector in society, and particularly the social care sector, social care workers. Remember, it wasn't only our residents who sadly died during that pandemic. Our care workers also died as well. And we would like recognition for the tremendous amount of work that they did throughout the pandemic, and in fact still are. We are still wearing masks for the majority of the time in care homes. We are still doing all infection control measures to try and keep our residents safe.
OK, look, Joyce, thank you very much. Joyce Penfield there, who's a spokesperson for the National Care Association. Interesting stuff, ladies and gents. What do you make of all of that? Matt Hancock's claims in his book that apparently care home staff were responsible largely for the spread of COVID in care homes. Yeah, look, I've got absolutely no doubt that there's an element of truth to that, but I've also got absolutely no doubt that people with COVID who weren't being properly tested for it were being sent into care homes that weren't their own, and enough PPE wasn't being provided. Although on the PPE front, I do have some sympathy because it was a national crisis, a global crisis, and there was a shortage of PPE, not least as well because other countries were nicking ours. When we booked it and we booked for it and it was coming over here, other countries were actually intercepting that and keeping it their own, notably the French. Anyway, there's a war brewing in Cornwall, a pasty war. It's a shift in tone, this people. A pasty war. It's Greggs, the popular bakery chain, and it's opening its doors in Truro today. And it's threatening to give the humble Cornish pasty a run for its money. Our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, went to find out what sort of reception Truro's newest store is receiving. And it's in a county, of course, that's very, very proud of its pasty.
On a high street in Cornwall's capital, an interloper has snuck in and set up shop. Greggs opens today, offering a tantalising selection of baked goods from sausage rolls to, well, pasties. And that's the problem. The locals have described the opening of Greggs in quite colourful terms. Some people are saying that it's an invasion, that it's an all-out war. It's even been described as the spawn of the devil. But that's not the view I'm hearing here in Truro.
It's champion, mate, why not? Fair competition.
But you're eating proper Cornish pasties.
That's because we're visiting from the north. And we get Greggs all the time. So it's a change for the norm for us.
Yeah. Good idea.
Oh.
Good idea, I like Greggs. Yeah.
A lot of people are saying it's bad for the pasty business.
Well, not everybody. I don't like pasties.
But not everyone has been so accommodating. Greggs has tried before to conquer Cornwall. Each time the locals have objected, boycotted, forcing one branch to close down. Well, Greggs are downplaying the opening. There is already a Greggs location in Launceston and at Cornwall Services, they say. But now residents of Truro will also be able to enjoy tasty bakes and sweet treats from Greggs. But when it comes to tasty bakes, there's only one contender on people's minds. Anne Muller has been selling pasties since the 80s.
Well, I learned to make a pasty at my mother's knee, and my grandparents on both sides made pasties. It was just, well, the staple diet of the Cornish, I suppose. You know, you wouldn't go without a pasty for a week.
It's a family firm, and son Fergus is in charge of pasty promotion.
All of our ingredients within the pasty, other than the pepper, is within 10 miles of us. The reasons for this is for the animal welfare. The animal shouldn't travel. The animal, you should know where your meat comes from. It's massively important. And if you're getting the rest of the ingredients for the pasty, it's good for our economy.
They say competition is healthy, but many say there's only room for one pasty maker in town. Greggs are up for the challenge and will be keeping a careful eye on footfall before expanding further into the county. But any plans for expansion could see the pasty wars turning nasty. Jeff Moody, GB News.
It's highbrow stuff here on GB News, isn't it? It really is. A pasty being described as the spawn of the devil. You love to see it. A lot of love already flowing in. Greggs is delicious and affordable. We love their tasty bakes and yum-yums from Janine. Welcome to Truro, she says. Well, there we are. The pasty wars. We'll be covering that like hawks. Anyway, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Lots more to come in the next hour. More on a Christmas of chaos as ambulance staff and other NHS staff walk out on 2 days next month. I will hopefully be speaking to a union representative on that. Do you think it's morally OK for ambulance workers to walk out on the 21st and the 28th of December? Also, that big question as well we're asking, do you think it's right the people who enter this country illegally should be made to wear an ankle tracker? GB Views at gbnews.uk. I will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. A jam-packed hour coming your way. You might actually be driving home for Christmas, whether you like it or not, as train strikes cripple festivities. Mick living up to his name. But not only that, but this afternoon, union bosses announced that ambulance staff will walk out on the 21st and the 28th of December. Are militant unions not only ruining the festive season, but now actually deliberately costing lives in order to try to get more money? Also this hour, should we put trackers on migrants who enter the UK illegally? Sir Keir Starmer has come under fire for suggesting that he actually backs the plan being explored by the Tory government. There's a lot of love for that idea in the inbox, and I can see why. Wouldn't it make us all feel a little bit safer? Anyway, we'll have more as police say that a man in his 20s has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by the King in Luton this afternoon. We lobbed an egg at the King. It's almost becoming fashionable, that now, isn't it? It's no laughing matter. It's no yoke. Have your say. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. The big ones for you today, people. Do you think it's OK to put ankle tags on illegal immigrants? And do you think that ambulance workers should not strike on moral grounds? I'll be back after the news.
Good afternoon. Almost exactly 2 minutes past 4. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff are to strike on the 21st and 28th of December in a dispute over pay. 3 unions, GMB, Unison and Unite, announced the industrial action across England and Wales. The GMB union says 10,000 ambulance staff, including paramedics, emergency care assistants and call handlers, will walk out. In a joint statement, the unions accused the government of ignoring pleas for a decent wage rise. The national lead officer at Unite, the union, Onay Kassab, says patients' lives are being put at risk because of staffing shortages.
Only 25% of shifts have the planned staff actually on that shift. There are 133,000 vacancies across the NHS in England alone. And what our members are telling us is that lives are being put at risk now and that people are dying now because of the state of the service.
Well, we've reached out to the government for a response, and as soon as we get it, we'll bring it to you here first at GB News. A man has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by King Charles in Luton. Bedfordshire police say the suspect, aged in his 20s, was arrested in St George's Square after an egg was believed to have been thrown in the direction of the monarch. King Charles was seen being guided away from the crowds by his security team following the incident. The King had been in Luton to meet community leaders and voluntary organisations. Baroness Monet is to take a leave of absence from the House of Lords following allegations that she benefited from a COVID PPE deal. It's alleged that Michelle Monet and her children received millions of pounds after she recommended a company to government ministers at the height of the pandemic. Baroness Monet has denied the allegations. The decision means she will not attend sittings of the House and won't be able to claim any allowance. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner says the PM should remove the whip from Baroness Monet, but he's too weak.
She saw the writing on the wall and did what she feels she needs to, but it shows also that the Prime Minister is still not tackling the problems we face that was around this VIP illegal fast-track lane that he put in his procurement strategy on how they receive goods, and that's still a problem to this day that the Prime Minister is still not dealing with.
The Health Secretary has told the House of Commons we are seeing an earlier peak in Strep A cases than usual, but there is no new strain. At least 9 children have died from the bacterial infection in the UK since September. The latest is a 5-year-old from Belfast. The government says antibiotics could be given to children at schools affected by Strep A infections as a preventative measure. NHS GP Dr Veena Babu is urging parents to be on the lookout for symptoms.
If you're a parent with a young child, look up the symptoms, have a look at Google images of what the skin rashes look like, have the information at your fingertips. If you can't get hold of your GP, there's 111. Most practices have either e-consults, text messages, telephone calls. Worst case scenario, and your child is unwell, of course take them to A&E and the paediatric department will help. So I think as parents, you need to empower yourself with the information and act quickly.
England's rugby head coach, Eddie Jones, has been sacked after 7 years in the job. Under his leadership, the England team took 3 Six Nations titles and got to the final of the 2019 World Cup in Japan. However, this season has been England's worst performance since 2008. His former number 2, Leicester's director of rugby, Steve Borthwick, has been tipped to replace him. The National Farmers Union is urging the government to support primary producers to avoid a food supply crisis. The union warns that farmers are under strain from rising fuel, fertiliser and feed costs. It also says, as well as egg shortages, other foods could be impacted. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs insists the UK has a high degree of food security. And protests have broken out in Indonesia after the country passed a new law making sex outside of marriage a criminal offence. The new code also bans cohabitation between unmarried couples and applies to Indonesian citizens and foreign tourists too. Breaking the new law carries the punishment of up to 1 year in jail. There are concerns it could deter tourists to the majority Muslim country, with the Deputy Chief of Indonesia's Tourism Board saying it's totally counterproductive when the economy is recovering from the pandemic. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, so let's get back to Patrick.
Loads to come for you this hour, ladies and gents. More strikes have sadly been announced. This time, ambulance workers and other NHS staff will walk out on December the 21st and the 28th. That includes paramedics, emergency care workers, 999 call handlers as well. Around 10,000 of them. This is across England and Wales. They've accused the government of ignoring their pleas for a decent wage rise. As I understand it, they were offered around a 4% pay increase. That clearly, in their view, is not enough. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner accused the government of negligence in its handling of the dispute with ambulance workers.
I mean, we've seen actually across the ambulance service the crisis that's engulfing our ambulance service. Only in the northwest, in my area, the ambulance service is saying, please do not ring for an ambulance unless it is absolutely desperately needed, and advising people to get taxis. I mean, the system is at breaking point, and the Health Secretary has failed to meet with the health trade unions throughout the whole summer. They knew this was coming, and they, again, negligently did nothing about it. The frustration for me is there is a common theme with all of these disputes, and that is this government failing to act in the interests of the British people.
Well, where do you stand on all of this? Do you think that actually that there is a moral obligation to not go on strike if it means that people do, frankly, die? Or actually, do you agree a little bit with what Angela Rayner had to say there, which is that if the government could see this coming, should they have done more? I suppose when it comes to the public sector, if every single person wants a pay rise, and not just a bit of a pay rise, but a pay rise that's backdated and in line with inflation, that is a heck of a lot of cash. And with the best will in the world, we are not a rampantly socialist country like Venezuela, which last time I checked, people were killing zoo animals for food. Meanwhile, Downing Street has pledged to push forward legislation which would ensure a minimum service level on the railways as the threat of more disrupted travel looms, with more strike dates announced over the Christmas period, including, obviously, Christmas Eve. Well, let's talk now to GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is in Westminster. Darren, very much a mixed bag when it comes to the blame game on this. Some people saying that certainly when it comes to the medical workers, that actually they're putting lives at risk. Other people saying, as Angela Rayner was actually, the government should have seen this coming and negotiated better earlier.
Yeah, indeed, and many feel that the government really have not been focused fundamentally on the issue of strikes in recent months, that ministers are not engaged in these different sectors, that maybe the drama, the psychodrama that we've seen here at Westminster since early September has sidelined some of those ministers that were chopping and changing all the time and not necessarily negotiating with unions, or indeed with the independent bodies sometimes that unions talk to. As from the government's point of view, though, they feel very much these are the trade unions holding the country to ransom. They insist that it is simply not possible to provide everyone with a double-digit pay rise during a cost of living crisis, because that would stoke the very reason for the cost of living crisis, i.e. inflation. It would actually make things worse. And they point to the fact that actually many public sector members do a hell of a lot better than their private sector equivalents, particularly when you take their entire remuneration, including pensions and stuff, involved as well. Though the unions feel that the government clearly could do more, and that is why they are turning the screws, frankly, on Downing Street and all this. We've seen a coordination now in these strikes that we've not really seen before, and it is across a whole range of sectors, Patrick. Nurses, posties, baggage handlers at airports, teachers, nurses, ambulance drivers, railway workers. It goes on and on and on. And I think the big problem for the government is, frankly, there is no end in sight to all of this. The unions are insistent they will carry on with this strike action beyond Christmas, and this month's going to be pretty desperate, with tens of thousands of days lost to strike action. And the big question for the government is, how do they play this? Yes, they talk about those minimal levels to try and prevent disruption, but that is in the future if they manage to pass the legislation here at Westminster. It's not going to help in the immediate term, and frankly, it's quite difficult and dangerous for the government, because yes, the public might well blame the unions if they get frustrated, but you know what? They might well blame the government too.
Yeah, indeed, and there's going to be a lot of this ping-pong going forward, and certainly the unions, well, they literally are saying, look, we don't want to have to do this, let's blame the government, but a lot of people are, when faced with the cold, hard reality of possibly not being able to get an ambulance or be seen in a hospital or get a train home for Christmas, for example, possibly going to maybe blame the people who have stood, or in the case of the striking workers, not stood right in front of them. Darren McCaffrey, thank you very much, our political editor in Westminster. Well, as ever, this show is always about you, and I get a fair bit of stick for constantly ramping up that I want to hear from you and emails and all of this stuff, and they're not doing enough of it. So I thought, right, alas, no more. So let's hear what some of you make of the strikes. Joining me now is a couple of GB News viewers. We've got Miranda Richardson from Northamptonshire and Brian Dugan from Solihull. Good stuff. Thank you very much, both of you, for coming on the show. Great to have you. Miranda, I'll start with you, if that's all right. How do you feel about the strikes when it comes to, let's do the ambulance workers, if that's OK. So you've got your paramedics, emergency care workers, 999 call handlers. They are definitely going to strike on the 21st and the 28th of December. How do you feel about that?
Do you know what? My dad was a paramedic for 30 years. And when we think about these people having to attend first on scene to a car crash, first on scene to a suicide, first on scene to deal with those bodies, to deal with those people, forgetting the fact they're also now cleaning up after people who can't get an appointment with their GP, so call an ambulance, and they're having to deal with all that aspect as well. These people are working really, really hard. And when we look at the fact that they didn't get to work from home, stay at home, you know, the whole NHS the whole time, we were still putting on them all the time. The cost of living affects all of us. Doesn't matter what job you're doing, it affects all of us. And these people have to turn up every day to some of the toughest and the most harrowing places we have seen that none of us will ever have to deal with, none of us will have to see, and they're supposed to just get on with that like everything's okay.
So you support the strike? Do you see you support it? Yeah, okay, fair enough.
I do support the strike.
All right, I'll come back to you, Miranda, because there are so many strikes. We can pick through some of the others with you as well. Brian, I'll throw it over to you, Brian, in Solihull. I'll ask you the same question specifically about these ambulance workers. And supposedly they've been offered a 4% pay rise. Turn that down, as we understand it. 10,000 workers going on strike. Your take?
I agree with a lot of what Miranda has said, particularly in terms of what's happened, Patrick, over recent times. I mean, these are people who were really at the forefront of what we went through during the pandemic and had to deal with all sorts of really tough circumstances in terms of their job. And as far as I can see, all we gave them was a clap at the end of it all. And that stopped. And, look, no one wants to see strikes, and it's almost, as you point out, Patrick, to the point where we're almost about, we're on the precipice of a general strike, it would seem. Yeah. But the point is this: there's a lot of burden and blame to go around in terms of this. It's not just the people who go on strike that we should be directing our ire at. It's everybody involved in these circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to stick with this one, I think, and I'll throw it back over to you again, Miranda. Can you see why? I copped it a lot, frankly, and I suspect that you maybe think I was wrong to do this. A lot of people did think I was wrong. When I first heard that nurses were going on strikes, this is before the ambulance thing was announced, I was quite strong about that because I've got to hold my hands up. My own family's personal track record with the NHS has not been great, but I understand that a lot of people's it has been. So I shouldn't let that maybe cloud my judgment as much as I have done in the past. I'll hold my hands up to that. But if someone does go on strike and they work in a profession where other people might die or not get health care as a result of you going on strike, Miranda, can you see why people would have a problem with that?
Of course I can see why people would have a problem with that. I think we all would, and I think that's when you kind of come back, if it happened to you and it personally happened to you, you're obviously going to take that view. But, you know, people die every day. That is a real sad, harsh reality. People are dying now for the simple fact that our NHS is broken and people are sitting in the back of ambulances for 7 or 8 hours waiting to get into A&E. You know, so that's going to be happening every day. there's no right or wrong answer to it, because we're going to blame them if they strike and somebody dies, and we're going to blame them if they don't because they're sat in the back of an ambulance for 8 or 9 hours. There's no unfortunate happy medium to this. We just have to like we've said, we've got to look at the much bigger picture, and we've got to look at all parties involved.
Yeah, Brian, let's talk about the railways now. Additional strike action being announced there, especially the Christmas Eve over right through to Boxing Day. There's so many strikes, I've forgotten exactly what days they are, but it's around that anyway, isn't it? You might just throw a dart at the calendar of December and you'll hit a strike day somewhere, won't you, in that period? Now, it's slightly different when it comes to railway workers because, as I understand it anyway, there's not as much of a recruitment and a retention crisis when it comes to that as there is in the medical profession. This is going to be massively inconvenient for people. People maybe the first open Christmas that we've had for a few years, getting to see their loved ones. Do you have sympathy for the rail workers going on strike?
I do. And I have equal sympathy for the people who are going to be affected by it all if they do go on strike as well. So again, I don't think we should be focusing in purely on the workers who are going on strike or the unions who are deciding this. Ultimately, Angela Rayner made a very good point, and it seems that this is right across the government right now in terms of any cabinet position. The ministers directly involved haven't really taken the issue on board as seriously and as precipitously as they.
Brian, I'm just going to cut in just because we're a bit pressed for time, and I want to get your view on this. Is one thing supporting or being broadly speaking in favour of people wanting more money, right? I get that, absolutely. But when it comes to the amount of money, and you look at the cost of living crisis we're in, and if you give rail workers, say the RMT strikers, you give them a pay rise which is backdated a bit, plus in line with inflation, or nurses even, something along the lines of 19.2%, then you have to kind of give everyone that pay rise in the public sector. And Brian, I think maybe that's where there has to be a bit of compromise now.
Yes, there absolutely does have to be compromise. But it seems, I've listened to Mick Lynch, and I know you referred to him earlier as Mick Grinch. I think he's been about as reasonable a guy as you could.
He's doing his job well. He's doing his job well is the thing. What the actual remit of his job description is, he's doing it phenomenally well. I am massively annoyed at I nearly said something else, massively annoyed at the idea that I won't be able to get the trains and stuff. But I suppose that's the point of the strike. Just very quickly, before I get shouted at to move on, can I just ask you both, you don't have to reveal this if you don't want. It's not quite like your medical records, but it's your voting records, right? So, Miranda, if you don't mind, who did you previously vote for? Who did you vote for at the last general election? And maybe who are you thinking of voting for next time, if you don't mind?
No, not at all. The last general election, I voted Conservative. I won't be this time.
Labour?
That's what I'll say on that one.
OK, she won't be drawn. All right, Brian?
The last general election, Patrick, I did not vote for Conservative. And like Miranda, even those who have voted for Conservative all the way, I think will be having certain different thoughts this time around.
Interesting stuff. Look, both of you, I really enjoyed that. And thank you so much for viewing the channel and for coming on. It's great to have you on. This is what makes us, it makes the world go round, as far as I can say. Thank you very much, both of you. Miranda Richardson there from Northamptonshire and Brian Dugan there from Solihull. Two GB News viewers there giving their views on, it's people like them and me and all of us watching who are going to be affected by this. I'm sure, judging by the inbox as well, there are massively mixed views on it. Both of those two individuals there were pretty much in favour, well, they were really, weren't they, in favour of the strikes. Had a lot of sympathy when it came to the ambulance workers, especially, who will be striking on the 21st and the 28th of December. That includes paramedics, emergency care workers, 999 call handlers. You add that, of course, to the nurses' strikes, which, unless something has changed in the last 10 minutes, which, let's be honest, it might have done, it's supposed to be the 15th and the 20th of December, all around that busy Christmas period. Do you think that the moral elements of that is there? Of course, as well, Mick Lynch just adding fuel to the fire. I mean, it was always going to happen, wasn't it? There was always going to end up being a strike on Christmas Eve. But how do you feel about that? Has it affected your Christmas plans? But we're moving away from that because, yes, grief, moving on. A 5-year-old has died in Northern Ireland after contracting Strep A, taking the total number of children now dying in the UK to 9. We'll have the latest on that from a medical expert, Dr. Chris Smith, next. We're also going to be asking whether or not you think it's right that illegal immigrants should be given a tag so we can track where they are across the UK. A broadly speaking positive reaction to that. GB Views at gbnews.uk. But before that, it's your weather.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Brighter skies for many of us today compared with the last few days, but there are some showers around and it is feeling cold. It's going to turn even colder. Winds now changing to a northerly direction, replacing the easterlies that we have seen. Now, the easterlies brought chilly weather, but the northerlies will bring even colder conditions over the next few days. They're also bringing clearer conditions. That's why the skies have been clearing in the south and the west through the day. But we've seen cloud for Northern Ireland, Northern Scotland, Eastern England, a few showers in places as well. Overnight, those showers will turn to more of a wintry nature as the cold air sets in. Some flakes of snow over the higher parts of Eastern England, for example, but more significant snow expected for the north of Scotland, where it's going to feel very cold by the end of the night. A touch of frost across many western areas elsewhere. Frost-free in the southeast, and for some places exposed to the northerly. But wherever you are, it is a cold start to Wednesday. A bright start, nevertheless, for northern and western England, Wales, as well as Northern Ireland. I think, again, a bit more cloud in the east and the north with showers. But for northern Scotland, those showers will be frequent, they'll be heavy, and they'll be composed of snow. So the snow building up from the north of Scotland, 5 centimetres at lower levels, 10 centimetres over the hills, for example. And the snow and some icy patches continues into Wednesday night. As showers come and go for the east of England through Wednesday nights, as well as Northern Ireland, parts of West Wales, we'll see some icy patches first thing Thursday. Otherwise, a widespread frost, clear skies and temperatures well below freezing widely across the UK, with lows of -5, -6, -7 Celsius in some of the chillier spots. But plenty of bright skies for many. Plenty of sunshine first thing Thursday, despite that chill in the air. Temperatures only slowly recovering through the morning. We'll see further sleet, snow showers in places, mainly eastern and northern coastal areas through Friday and into the weekend.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Well, when it comes to illegal immigration in this country, we cover it all the time here on GB News, don't we? Especially on this particular show. But the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has said that he supports tracking asylum seekers with GPS tags in some particular cases. Some people would argue in every single case. But earlier this year, the government rolled out electronic tagging for some migrants who are facing deportation. The move has been decried by a number of those very worthy charities. But speaking this morning, the leader of the opposition said the use of trackers was appropriate while claims are still being processed, and a lot of you appear to agree with him. So, is this the right way to keep track of asylum seekers in the UK? Joining me now is international security expert, international man of mystery, more like, Will Geddes. There we go, a regular here on GB News. Will, should we be tracking every single person, do you think, with a tag who comes here in a dinghy across the channel?
I don't think everybody, Patrick. I think, you know, there are a couple of practicality issues here. Number one, if people are tagged, how are they going to be monitored? So if someone breaks that tag off, so like, for example, offenders, when they're released on bail, pending potential sentencing or potential custodial sentences, the problem that you have is how they monitored. If they break it off and they run and scarper away, how do you track them down? And we know that the police resources are very, very overloaded at the moment and under-resourced. So the question is, it's about priorities. And I think what Keir Starmer is saying, and there's rare occasions that I actually agree with any of Keir Starmer's ideas, but in this instance, I think there are some priority targets or priority individuals that perhaps could be tagged and I think, again, monitored, because one of the biggest problems is the moment people come over, once they get amongst us, they could disappear into the crowd.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to end up with figures dropping one day, probably quite soon, of the amount of people who've absconded. There'll be an FOI request, something that goes in with that. But I think it's more about public safety than anything else. And I think the public would feel reassured if they could see that these people had tags on.
Yeah, I agree as well. And I think what kind of tags there's going to be. And again, a lot of these groups that are very sort of heavy-hearted about tagging of illegal immigrants, well, you know, if you wear a GPS watch like I do, or you have a phone in your pocket, you are already being tagged, you're already sending out a signal of your position to, albeit big data companies and the phone networks. But I think in terms of individuals coming over here, we have a huge problem. We have a huge problem with people integrating themselves into communities, disappearing amongst the populace. And I think there's got to be some measures, not only on a practical level, Patrick, but I think also as a warning shot to other individuals who are intending to come over here, who may not have very legitimate claims for asylum.
Well, this is it. And in a way, it could sort the wheat from the chaff, because if someone has serious concerns about wearing one of these things, that implies they were planning on absconding anyway. If someone does break one off and goes missing, well, we do know if we are able to track them down, well, they're straight out the door, hopefully, anyway. So you would have thought that maybe those considerations would be OK. For people that say that, oh, it's against their human rights, some would argue that if they're being put up in four-star hotels and if they are accepted into this country to get the benefit, or their kids would have a free education system and living here in peace and harmony, wearing an ankle tag for a short period of time is not the end of the world.
No, it's not. And look at the alternatives. So they could be actually in a processing centre. And as we saw on the South Coast, you know, these are basically packed to capacity and beyond capacity. So in some regards, it's actually more humane to be able to release them, to be able to stay in a hostel with a tag rather than being held in a big processing centre where the conditions may be actually really terrible.
Well, especially when we see what's been going on with the diphtheria cases. And there is this side of it as well, that arguably it's more humane for these people, maybe more cost-effective for Britain as well.
Yeah.
These people would not necessarily have to be held in, as you said, a detention centre. And as long as they kept the tag on, they would essentially be free to walk around. And also, if they are, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here, struggling a bit with our societal norms, you would be able to see has one of them been hanging around a local school or something like this, or if there's been a crime that's been committed, or if shopkeepers are saying that they've had things nicked from their shops, you would be able to sort that out quite quickly.
Yeah, you'd be able to attribute certainly some of those issues much more closely to potential offenders. And I'm not saying that illegal immigrants are necessarily offenders, but certainly, as you said earlier, in terms of sorting the wheat from the chaff, this is another way of doing it. I think the other consideration is within certain communities, and we've seen flashpoint situations, particularly in some of the rural communities, where some of the illegal immigrants have been positioned and housed in some of the hotels, and there have been clashes between the two. So it's not a question of marking someone that visibly. And again, depending on what sort of tag it might be, it will no doubt differentiate from the type that, say, criminal offenders will be carrying. Otherwise, inevitably, they will be clubbed into the same
Union Jack tag
thing.
was floated by our previous guest on this, Peter Blexley. He said that that would be a good marker when it came to showing that these people weren't criminals, for example. Would you be in favour of a Union Jack tag?
I think that's got all sorts of dangerous connotations there, Patrick. I'm not sure I'd agree with Peter on that one. I think ultimately you could have something which was identifiable, something that wasn't embarrassing. And bear in mind, let's say if you or I were wearing a tag, you know, would we want something that's going to be flashing and indicating us to all and sundry? Not necessarily, but I think it has to be some sort of identifier which potentially makes it far less easy for the individual to just disappear.
Yeah, agreed completely. Well, thank you very much. Well, Getty's international security expert just reacting to the news that, well, realistically now, we may well end up tagging people who arrive to this country illegally. Your views on all of this, as ever, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Patrick Christys here with you for the next hour and a half or so. Coming up, we'll have more as police say a man in his 20s has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by the King in Luton town centre this afternoon. And more of your thoughts on these mass walkouts right across the public sector coming up this Christmas. This afternoon, union bosses announced ambulance staff and other NHS staff will walk out on the 21st and the 28th of December. Are militant unions ruining the festive season, or are they right to demand a pay rise? But first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Thanks, Patrick. It's 4:32. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff will strike on the 21st and 28th of December in a dispute over pay. Three unions, GMB, Unison and Unite, announced the industrial action across England and Wales. GMB says 10,000 ambulance staff, including paramedics and call handlers, will walk out. In a joint statement, the unions accused the government of ignoring pleas for a decent wage rise. A man has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by King Charles in Luton. Bedfordshire police say the suspect, aged in his 20s, was arrested after an egg was thrown in the direction of the monarch. King Charles was seen being guided away from the crowds by his security team following the incident. The King had been in Luton to meet community leaders and voluntary organisations. Baroness Monet is taking a leave of absence from the House of Lords following allegations that she benefited from a COVID PPE deal. It's alleged that Michelle Monet and her children received millions of pounds after she recommended a company to government ministers at the height of the pandemic. Baroness Monet has denied those allegations. The decision means she will not attend sittings of the House and won't be able to claim any allowance. The Health Secretary has told the House of Commons we are seeing an earlier peak in Strep A cases than usual, but there is no new strain. At least 9 children have died from the bacterial infection in the UK since September. The latest is a 5-year-old from Belfast. The government says antibiotics could be given to children at schools affected by Strep A infections as a preventative measure. England's rugby head coach Eddie Jones has been sacked after 7 years in the job. Under his leadership, England won 3 Six Nations titles and got to the final of the 2019 World Cup in Japan. However, this season's been England's worst performance since 2008. His former number 2, Leicester's director of rugby, Steve Borthwick, has been tipped to replace him. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, you're watching GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Now, food shortages could be hitting more than just eggs, as the National Farmers Union has warned that the UK is sleepwalking into a food supply crisis. They're asking for the government to step in to help farmers who are struggling against soaring fuel, fertiliser and feed costs, the 3 Fs. However, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs has said the UK has a highly resilient food supply chain. Earlier, the NFU held a press conference about the prospect of winter food shortages, and joining me now is GB News' national reporter, Ellie Costello. Ellie, what's going on there?
Well, it's the worst possible timing, isn't it, Patrick, for these kind of warnings that the UK is sleepwalking into a food supply crisis. That is a stark warning today from the National Farmers Union. They've held an emergency press conference this afternoon, and they've stated that we've seen the shortage with eggs, haven't we? We've seen the shelves running bare. Some shops have even implemented a 2-box rule when it comes to buying eggs, but they warn today that it might not end there. We could see other foods becoming short on the shelves too. They warned that energy-intensive crops, we know that the cost of energy has increased rapidly in the past year since the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And they're saying that those crops that need lots of energy to grow, so things like cucumbers, things like tomatoes and pears, they are likely to hit a 37-year low next year. Farmers simply won't be able to afford to grow them. So we could see that food shortage reach our fruit and veg veg sector. There was also warnings about dairy as well. As we've heard from egg farmers in recent weeks, it hasn't been cost effective to produce eggs. They simply aren't making enough money from them. Well, it could then stem into milk. It could fall below the cost of production. And beef farmers as well, they're considering limiting the number of cows that they breed simply because it's getting too expensive to raise beef in this country. Fertiliser prices have tripled in the past 4 years, and the cost of feed is up by 75%. So lots of issues which mean that we could see a shortage of many different types of food in the next few weeks and months. Well, earlier I spoke to the president of the National Farmers Union, Minette Batters, and I asked her about the current situation.
Everybody will be well aware of inflation, cost of living. For farmers and for growers, they are facing unprecedented cost inflation, currently at over 30%. So it's really, really challenging out there. We're wanting fairness, effectively, everybody in that supply chain to share some of the burden in order to make sure that consumers don't face higher prices or suffer loss of availability. The rationing of eggs being an example at the moment, hence why we've asked for government to have an emergency investigation into the egg sector, use the powers that they have within the Agricultural Act to deal with exceptional market circumstances.
Well, the National Farmers Union say that this is a perfect storm. This is in part down to the Ukraine war. It's also to do with the coronavirus pandemic, and it's also down to Brexit. And they spoke about Brexit red tape and workers' shortages also being factors in this emergency situation. But Patrick, this ultimately comes down to the consumer, doesn't it? And people who are trying to put food on the table, and they'll be hearing this news and thinking about the cost of food and also likely shortages of food as well. It does mean that if there's less production of food, then prices will continue to go up. And in a cost of living crisis, that is something that's going to be very, very difficult for many people. So that is what the National Farmers Union are calling for today, urgent action in order to keep food production up and keep those prices as low as possible.
Ellie, thank you very, very much. Ellie Costello there, our very own national reporter, just bringing you bang up to date when it comes to what's been going on in the world of farming. But somebody else now who can do just the same is arable farmer Andrew Ward, MBE, no less, who've gotten right to the top when it comes to this. Thank you very much, Andrew. Great to have you on the show. Right, OK. Yes, good stuff. Right, OK, so you were awarded an MBE for services to farming resilience. How can we make farming more resilient? Look, does this boil down a bit to the cost of energy and things like that really is now making it significantly less cost-effective for farmers to just do their job and produce stuff?
We've hardly got time to button down really what the total situations are because there's just so many. But yeah, it does come down to energy. It comes down to Brexit. And I must say it actually a lot of it is down to government policy because it's government policy and the lack of government knowledge and the lack of them taking it for serious, if you like, and being serious about where we are is the situation we're facing ourselves in today. And the cost of us producing food, the cost of us growing crops, and also, I'll add, it's the cost of looking after the environment and nature, which is we hear about that all the time.
Well, yeah. Can I interject that? Because can I just freely hold my hands up and say every single thing I know about farming, which is not a lot, comes from Clarkson's Farm, OK? And I don't know whether or not you've ever watched that. I think it's fantastic. But one of the things that's really stood out to me there is the ludicrous amounts of well, frankly, I would argue pointless laws. You may disagree. Just the amount of hoops that farmers have to jump through. Now, I would assume, oh, he's gone, so we'll never know. Anyway, Andrew there, who was, at least for a while, talking a lot of sense about farming. Andrew Ward, MBE. Right, I'm going to go into the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thank you very much, everybody who's been getting in touch. Strikes, strikes, strikes. Here's Ginny. Ginny says, I'm a nurse and I'm tired of being demonised and being told that we have no rights to defend our living standards. We have just as much right to strike as anyone else. We cannot live. If your medical professionals cannot live, how do you expect us to supply a good service for our patients? Yes, OK, fair enough. The counter-argument to that, Ginny, and some would put it across, I was putting it across earlier, to be fair, was that, well, if you do go into a job and you know the pay scale that's in that and you also are aware that your job might mean life and death for people, And then it's all very well and good saying, well, if we go on strike, then people won't die because we make provisions for it. But then the likes of the ambulance workers get on board as well, paramedics, emergency care, 999, call handlers, and that means that people do die. Does that change the game a little bit? I am sympathetic towards nurses being given more money, do not get me wrong, but then you have to have a look at what the unions are, or appear to be negotiating for anyway, somewhere in the region of a 9.2% pay rise. I don't know, Ginny, I'm very, very grateful, obviously, very grateful for the work that you do. But is there a moral thing there that would stop a lot of people striking? I don't know. Greg says, I'm losing sympathy with the strikers, including the NHS. They are being manipulated by the unions. Yeah, and I wonder about this, Greg, actually. I wonder how much manipulation there is. I'm keen to get a union member on at some point soon. We normally get one on most days. We are awaiting one today. Because not all is as it seems. When you hear that unions have voted to strike, it makes it sound, doesn't it? Like, oh, absolutely everyone in this union has voted to strike. Well, the unions don't represent all staff. In fact, quite often they're represented by a group of different unions. And then of those, by no means does it mean that all of them have actually voted. The turnout can be quite low. Of that, how close to 50% have voted to strike? Then do they aggregate it by trust? So it's not like every single nurse has voted to strike. When you really drill down into it, the number of people sometimes who've genuinely voted to strike is nowhere near the amount of people that you think they are. And anyway, he says, I don't understand why people praise Mick Lynch. I've never heard him say once where he would compromise. He's loving it. I think it's a tough one for me with Mick Lynch. I don't agree with what he's doing, and I think that, frankly, he is loving it, actually. And I think this is his kind of big moment, and he will dine out on this for years to come. He's also on a significantly higher wage than the vast majority of workers that he represents. There is all of that stuff. However, his job description is clearly to try to get the best for his union workers when it comes to pay. And he is obviously doing everything he can to do that. Whether or not that's the right thing for the consumer and for everybody else is a different question. But so there's two sides to it. I also do think as well, he is wiping the floor very often in terms of interviews with politicians and with other people. So I do find that, you know, quite interesting. Maybe it's exposing a weakness of our political class, but there we are. Graham says, rail workers are well paid for what they do compared to NHS staff and should accept the pay offer from the government. Well, yes, indeed. I mean, a lot of people would agree with you there. And certainly when it comes to a recruitment crisis for rail workers, a big thing for me about the rail worker situation as well is, as far as I can tell, they do seem to be trying to ring-fence some jobs that may not need to exist that much going forward. When it comes to things like increases in technology, do we need as many guards, for example? Do we need as many platform attendants? Do we need as many signallers? And that's where the argument, again, is a bit lost for me. It's one thing saying we need a pay rise in the middle of a cost of living crisis. It's one thing saying we need better conditions. It's another thing entirely asking the taxpayer to keep paying for jobs that don't necessarily need to exist. But there we go. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch. One of the other big topics of the day, of course, that I've been asking you about is whether or not we should be tagging people who enter this country illegally. And one of the big points that a lot of you have been getting in touch about, including Andy, has been that, actually, how much would it cost? Well, yeah, we don't really know. But I think, in theory, it's quite a good idea because it would bring a lot of public safety and reassurance. I don't know about in your area, but certainly in my area. These people are free to come and go from hotels. I am deeply sceptical as to how many of them return in the evenings and whether or not we would be told how many of them would return in the evening. Certainly, if I thought I wasn't going to be granted an asylum claim in a country that I was desperate to stay in, I probably would scarper as well, especially when you're as close to London as we are right here at GB News and where I live. I'd be inclined to disappear into the ether, I think. But the vast majority of people who've been getting in touch about the idea that whether or not we should be tagging illegal immigrants seem to be in favour of the tags. But we're moving away from that now. Someone who might be wearing a tag at some point soon. A man in his 20s has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by the King in Luton town centre. That's according to Bedfordshire Police. It's after an egg is believed to have been thrown in the direction of King Charles. GB News' royal reporter Cameron Walker is with me now. So, an egg was lobbed at our king again.
He was. Another egg. There were 4 eggs thrown in the direction of the king and queen consorts in York about a month ago. Today, it was 1 egg, we believe. It was very smooth, actually, the way the security services handled this today. He was greeting members of the crowd in a town square in Luton, not very far from London, and he was very quickly moved away from the crowd so the security services could try and establish what was going on, and then he was moved back to another section of the crowd away from the man in his 20s who has now been arrested on suspicion of common assault, who is alleged to have chucked an egg in the direction of the king. It's difficult for Charles because, on the one hand, he wants to be personable, he wants to be able to be approachable and greet as many members of his subjects as possible, but clearly there are security concerns, especially that there has been 2 very similar incidents happening quite so soon after one another.
Yeah, well, it's almost becoming fashionable to lob an egg at the king now, isn't it? Which is a concern. And yes, it would be a security issue. One would expect it's almost impossible to police the crowds. You can't just pat everyone down for eggs, can you?
No, exactly. And I think that's half the problem. I think, luckily, that Charles always has a very strong security presence around him. There's the police, then, of course, he's got his close protection officers as well. They'll be very trained in dealing with these kind of situations, which is why we probably haven't seen any of the eggs actually hit their target.
Yes.
But the problem is, how do you stop people from bringing eggs in the first place?
Well, you don't really, do you? And it's almost impossible to police just anyone going shopping for eggs. But can I ask you, as a royal reporter, Cameron, you wanted to report on all of things royals, and in the end, we inevitably end up talking to you about things like an egg being lobbed at a king, or Meghan and Harry's latest outburst. Their documentary or docu-series or whatever, is it on Thursday it comes out? No, not
First
this Thursday.
3 episodes come out on Thursday.
You'll be glued to it, will you?
I will be, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, I will be as well.
All of it. So I think the frustration with royal correspondence is inevitably a distraction from the good work that other members of the royal family are doing. Granted, Harry and Meghan do charity work as well, but at the moment the focus is very much on this Netflix documentary. Now, you might have seen the front pages this morning, Patrick, that a number of the shots used in the trailer that was released yesterday from this documentary aren't what they initially seem. So, for example, there is one particular shot which is from above of Harry, Meghan and their young son Archie in South Africa. Now, from the way that the narration was going, it suggests that it was one rogue photographer who just happened to be snapping and invading on the couple's privacy. That wasn't the case at all. What actually happened was it was a rotor camera operator. So on a royal tour, it's agreed with Kensington Palace at the time and the royals themselves. It's a very small number of journalists can film them and then share the footage with the rest of the media. And in that instance, that is exactly what happened. There's another shot with paparazzi photographers who are chasing somebody. They weren't chasing Harry and Meghan, they were chasing Katie Price outside a court.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. So this has all come to light today, which I'm not saying that it was intentional, that Harry and Meghan had deliberately deceived, or indeed Netflix or their PR teams have deliberately deceived the British public. But what it does do is weaken their argument, that if they are trying to make the argument...
We're going to end up watching this, and by the way, I feel like a massive hypocrite when it comes to Meghan and Harry stuff, because I am going to watch it, and I am like that person who buys a ticket to a stand-up comedy show knowing that that comedian offends them and sits in the front row deliberately to be offended. That's going to be me when this Meghan and Harry documentary drops and the episodes of it drop. I'm going to be glued to it, getting absolutely seething in my own front room. But someone, and I'm hoping that person might be you, Cameron, someone's going to have to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and just mop up all of the utter tosh, because we've got stuff like this, haven't we, already, which is the media paparazzi, and it turns out it's someone chasing Katie Price, for goodness sake. And we've already had some right royal fibs coming out of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's mouths. But anyway, Cameron, thank you very much. Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter, initially talking about how the king was egged and then veering on inevitably towards Harry and Meghan. Anyway, right, OK, food shortages could be hitting more than just eggs, so timely. As the National Farmers Union has warned that the UK is sleepwalking into a food crisis, I believe that Andrew Ward, MBE, arable farmer, joins me again now after a brief technical interlude. Andrew, thank you very much.
Hello, Patrick. Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So, shocking levels of red tape, needless government intervention. You know the land. Why don't we just let you crack on and farm the thing?
Well, I wish that would be the case, but the government don't seem to want to do that. They have so many advisors, Chris Packham, George Monbiot, the Goldsmiths. They listen more to those sort of people who sit behind the desk and advise the government on how we should be farming and produce the food than us on the ground doing it. And it just, you cannot believe the stress that we all have to go through in the countryside and the red tape. This is the other thing, Patrick. When Brexit came along, that's one of the major issues of where we are today. When Brexit came along, they said, oh, we'll be OK. You as a farmer, you'll have a lot less red tape than you've had in the past. Absolute rubbish. We've far more red tape. We've far more hoops to jump through. And we're getting far more problems, complicated.
Could that be thwarted? Yeah. Can I ask you about that? Is that a bit of a choice, an incorrect choice by our government? So as a result of Brexit, could we have a lot less red tape. It's just the fact that that hasn't materialised.
Well, I'd like to think so, because that was one of the promises that we were told with Brexit. I voted to remain, so I'm a Remainer, and you know, I didn't enjoy the afterthoughts of all what was going to happen. And we were told that, yes, because we're now out of Europe, the shackles have been released, and we'll be able to set our own standards, our own policies, and you'll be able to farm and produce food in a way that will be much more better for you, and you'll be able to remain profitable, which is a big thing.
Well, I don't see why we can't do that. I mean, the idea that all of a sudden, as virtue of us not being in the European Union, that our health standards and food quality standards are going to drop just for no reason whatsoever, just because we could. I mean, it's bonkers. I mean, we've been surviving off the things that British farmers have been growing or looking after or slaughtering or whatever for years, for generations, for hundreds of years, thousands of years probably, if you really take it back to its natural conclusion. Why would any of that change now? And I can't help but think that I personally don't believe we've made the most of Brexit. I did vote for Brexit, but and it's stuff like this. Why should we be kowtowed in this particular area to, oh, well, our standards don't technically align to the European? I don't give a toss about a wonky banana. I just don't care. No. Give me the most bizarre-looking parsnip in the world and I'll eat it, you know. Andrew, should we have a bit more faith with people like you?
And this is the problem we've got, that Lincolnshire provides around 27% of the vegetables for the whole of the country. Yet because of the government visa policy stopping foreigners coming into this country, we have got vegetables 10 miles from here rotting in the fields because there aren't enough pickers to pick the vegetables. We've tried UK workers, and British people don't want the hard work. And they say another thing we get labelled at us and told we're wrong is that we rely on cheap foreign labour. That is wrong, because the money that these guys earn and ladies earn when they come from abroad, they earn really, really good money. And that's why they come, because they then send all the money back to abroad, back in their countries to help their family. But it's government visa policy is one thing, and
we need to be doing more. We should have. Sorry, I'm to cut across you. I appreciate you hanging around. I've got to go to the news shortly, but we should be doing more. There should be more of an advertising campaign or something like that to really promote people doing seasonal work and working for you guys, and also young people as well. I mean, if it turns out that you could earn more doing something like picking those fields than you could from just working behind a bar somewhere or doing one of those jobs, I think younger people should be doing it, and people actually should, future employers should look at the CV of someone who's 20 years old who's decided, instead of going with the best one in the world, I've worked at bars and restaurants, right? Yeah, I understand that, but it's probably harder work and maybe it's more manual labour to pick a field. You know, maybe they should be looked at more favourably when it comes to... But I've got to let you go, I'm afraid. Sorry about this. Andrew Ward, MBE there, arable farmer. Right, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Lots more to come in the next hour, including MP Lee Anderson. Yes, get in. On whether or not he thinks that migrants should be given ankle tags to track. Also, the ex-British Army officer who went head-to-head with the RMT on Twitter. It's spicy. You'll love to see it. I'll be back in a tick.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News.
Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, lovely people, it's just gone 5 o'clock, which means it's time to down tools at wherever it is you work and just stay locked into me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. And in the next hour, ambulance workers are set to join rail staff as we look ahead to a mass walkout this Christmas.
Ambulance dispute like this is going to have an impact. We will do what we can to make sure the most needful cases are covered, but it will have an impact on the public.
It will, and by public he means patients and, well, specifically sick people. Andy Prendergast, the National Secretary of the GMB union there. Are militant unions putting the most vulnerable at risk? Loads to get stuck into there. Paramedics, emergency care workers, 999 call handlers, they're all on strike, as well as nurses. But in another story that's got you all going so far today, Conservative MP Lee Anderson, let's be honest, a fan favourite, on his radical plans to cut the numbers of migrants making their way illegally to the UK, whilst the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, appears to back tracking illegal immigrants, put trackers on illegal migrants. I think that's a fantastic idea, actually. Anyway, and are Meghan and Harry at risk of destroying the monarchy?
Realized they're never going to protect you.
I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself.
Anyway, email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's what I think of that Harry and Meghan stuff. But before that, it's your latest news.
Thanks, Patrick. 3 minutes past 5, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Downing Street has declined to reveal if the Prime Minister is worried about patients dying due to NHS strikes. It's after 3 unions announced that thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff will walk out across England and Wales on the 21st and 28th of December. In a joint statement, GMB, Unison and Unite accused the government of ignoring pleas for a decent pay rise. However, Health Secretary Steve Barclay responded, saying that unions' demands are not affordable. Onay Kassab is the national lead officer at Unite. He says patients' lives are already at risk.
Only 25% of shifts have the planned staff actually on that shift. There are 133,000 vacancies across the NHS in England alone. And what our members are telling us is that lives are being put at risk now and that people are dying now because of the state of the service.
A man has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by King Charles in Luton. Bedfordshire police say the suspect, aged in his 20s, was arrested in St George's Square after an egg was believed to have been thrown in the direction of the monarch. King Charles was seen being guided away from the crowds by his security team following that incident. The King had been in Luton to meet community leaders and voluntary organisations. Baroness Monet is to take a leave of absence from the House of Lords following allegations that she benefited from a COVID PPE deal. It's alleged that Michelle Monet and her children received millions of pounds after she recommended a company to government ministers at the height of the pandemic. Baroness Monet has denied the allegations. The decision means she will not attend sittings of the House and won't be able to claim any allowance. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner says the PM should remove the whip from the Baroness, but he's too weak.
She saw the writing on the wall and did what she feels she needs to, but it shows also that the Prime Minister is still not tackling the problems we face that was around this VIP illegal fast-track lane that he put in his procurement strategy on how they receive goods, and that's still a problem to this day that the Prime Minister is still not dealing with.
The Health Secretary has told the House of Commons we are seeing an earlier peak in Strep A cases than usual, but there is no new strain. At least 9 children have died from the bacterial infection in the UK since September. The latest is a 5-year-old from Belfast. The government says antibiotics could be given to children at schools affected by Strep A as a preventative measure. NHS GP Dr Veena Babu is urging parents to be on the lookout for symptoms.
If you're a parent with a young child, look up the symptoms, have a look at Google images of what the skin rashes look like, have the information at your fingertips. If you can't get hold of your GP, there's 111. Most practices have either e-consults, text messages, telephone calls. Worst case scenario and your child is unwell, of course take them to A&E and the paediatric department will help. So I think as parents, you need to empower yourself with the information and act quickly.
7 more cases of diphtheria have been recorded among migrants in England, taking the total for the year to 57. The UK Health Security Agency published the figures following reports of fresh cases at Manston Processing Centre in Kent. The cases, discovered between November 28th and December the 4th, mark an increase from the previous week, where only 5 new cases were diagnosed. Last week, the Immigration Minister told MPs asylum seekers with diphtheria symptoms would be put into isolation. England's rugby head coach, Eddie Jones, has been sacked after 7 years in the job. Under his leadership, the England team took 3 Six Nations titles and got to the final of the 2019 World Cup in Japan. However, this season has been England's worst performance since 2008. His former number 2, Leicester's Director of Rugby, Steve Borthwick, has been tipped to replace him. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, so let's get back to Patrick.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm bang up for it in this final hour, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going in strong, actually, because there is a case for GPS tagging some asylum seekers, some will call them illegal immigrants, whilst their claims are being processed. That's according to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. It's also something the Conservative Party has floated before. But he's thrown his weight behind the policy, much to the dismay of some migrant support charities. But let's be honest, it doesn't take much to dismay that lot, does it? It follows reports this weekend that the UK could impose a statutory cap on the number of asylum seekers the country can take per year. Anyway, let's get stuck into the meat and bones of this now with a fan favourite here on GB News. The Conservative MP for Ashfield is Lee Anderson. Now, he's called for a cap on the number of asylum seekers who will be allowed into the UK each year. There's a lot for us to talk about here. Lee, do you mind if I just start on the tagging stuff, really? Why have we not been doing this the whole time? I'm sick and tired of the idea that this lot might be able to abscond across the UK. Put a tag on them, we know where they are at all times, we stop people absconding and the public feel reassured as well.
Well, look, I mean, I already believe that the tagging is in place for people facing deportation anyway, so that already happens. Yeah, I mean, I haven't got a problem with tagging asylum seekers. So it seems a little bit funny, though, Patrick, that all of a sudden, Sir Keir, who seems to be pandering to the right-wing press at the moment and the right-wing voters, is suggesting this. I would suggest myself that his party will not be entirely happy with this. They'll suggest things like psychological torture. But look, you know, if they're in this country, we don't know the background. Some are a little bit dodgy, as we already know. What's wrong with tagging them? You know, for me, they shouldn't be in the first place. But if tagging means we can keep an eye on them, you know, track the movements for you know, while the asylum claims are going through, then so be it. If it makes us feel safer, let's do it.
Well, you're saying that, in your view, and I think it's a view shared by many, a lot of them shouldn't be here in the first place. How are you planning on capping the number of asylum seekers, because we seem unable to stop the small boats at the minute?
Well, I mean, when you look at how many people's coming over the channel, Patrick, especially the Albanians, I think it's 12,000 so far this year, predominantly 95% are young men. That doesn't seem like a fair system we've got in place, does it? If we're going to have a cap, I would also suggest that we cap the amount of men that's coming in. I look at women and children in foreign lands that desperately need our help. They're not getting that help. And all we see is, like I say, 95% of the people coming over are young men from so-called war-torn countries. Let me tell you again for GB News viewers who back me on this, there is no war in France. There's no war in Spain or Belgium or Holland or in Albania. All these countries are coming through. There's no wars at all.
No, indeed, and people have got a lot of issues. Lee, can you just stay there? Sorry about this. I'm just getting something through in my ear, which I'm not too sure about. But, Lee, would you mind? Sorry, just staying there. Apparently, we can go live now to the House of Commons, where Angela Rayner's talking. There you go, have a bit of that.
Is it not clear to the public now that the party opposite believe in one thing only, and that is how much money they can grab from the public purse and give to their crony friends and steal from the hard-working pockets of people in this country?
I think my honourable friend captures the mood of the public. Yeah. They want answers. Yeah. The public want answers. They want to know what's happened. At the time when they needed this government the most to act responsibly, what's happened to their money and what happened with these contracts. So today we've tabled this motion and we will put it to a vote. Let me be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we're not asking the government to do anything that would undermine any chance of recovering our money or that would conflict with any police investigation. But for 10 months, they have told us that they are in mediation. What progress has been made? When will they conclude it has failed and take action now? Can they actually get our money back? Or are they just kicking the can down the road? So our motion asks ministers to hand over the records to the Public Accounts Committee, a body this House relies on to hold them to account for public spending. Because the only logical conclusion is that they do indeed have something to hide. The public deserve answers on whether the dodgy lobbying at the heart of this scandal played a part in how vast sums of taxpayers' cash has been wasted, and whether shameful profiteering has been enabled by this government. Which leads me to the second simple question for the House today. Will members opposite, well, the few that are in, will members opposite now vote for a clean-up or yet another cover-up? Yeah. Just last week, the government led Tory members in the other place through the lobbies to block an amendment to their procurement bill. It would have banned VIP lanes in future procurement decisions. But they voted it down. They voted to protect unlawful VIP access instead of protecting taxpayers' money. The Prime Minister is peddling legislation full of loopholes that would give Tory ministers free rein to do it all over again. Fresh from writing off billions he carelessly cost to COVID fraud, the question for the House is whether to act to prevent a repeat. So today, I say to honourable and right honourable members opposite, learn your lesson. Don't let this shameful episode be repeated. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the loss and trauma of the pandemic was immense. Millions of families lost loved ones, some only getting to say goodbye via iPad as mothers, fathers, husbands, wives and friends slipped away. And then we learn that throughout this trauma, companies with WhatsApp links to ministers were given special VIP access to contracts which have seen billions poured down the drain. This government has done untold damage to the public's faith in politics. Yep. The first step in restoring this trust is publishing these documents today. Yeah. The public need answers about how this happened, and they need them now, Madam Deputy Speaker. But they also deserve reassurances that this will never, ever be allowed to happen again. Taxpayers' money must be treated with respect, not handed out in backroom deals to cronies or a passport to profiteering. And PPE MedPro is just the tip of the iceberg in this scandal. We now know that companies that got into the VIP lane were 10 times more likely to win a contract. We now know that many did not go through the so-called 8-stage process of due diligence, as ministers have now admitted. And we now know that this left dozens of experienced British businesses out in the cold. Businesses who had the expertise to procure PPE and ventilators precisely and fast. Businesses who offered their help in our darkest hour. And businesses whose only mistake was to play by the rules. Not a single one of the companies referred to the VIP lane was done so by a politician of any other political party other than the Conservative Party. The then Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, the Cabinet member who oversaw the entire emergency procurement programme, reportedly fast-tracked a bid from one of his own personal friends and donors, who went on to win hundreds of millions of pounds of public money. Last week, he said that he simply referred the bid from PPE MedPro on to officials. Yet we also know that he passed it directly on to his ministerial colleague, Lord Agnew. I'll happily give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and she's given a very thoughtful speech that should put everybody on the opposite benches to shame.
Exactly.
Because my honourable friend, as shocked as I was to find out that there was a company that was put on the VIP lane by mistake, and they still got £1 million contracts.
Oh, gosh. Wow. It is absolute negligence of due diligence when the whole process, which we now know has been tested in the High Court around this VIP access lane, and what that did and what it didn't do. But we know that there is serious concerns from members of the public, and that's what this motion is about today. It's about getting to the bottom of it, and I think the public deserve no less than that. But after the Minister passed it directly on to his ministerial colleague, Lord Agnew, and sometime later, officials discussed that the Minister's office was still being furiously lobbied. The former Health Secretary is also described being lobbied in words I won't quote in the chamber, Madam Deputy Speaker has made it clear, but without any dates or details. So we do not know exactly what conversations or contracts happened behind the scenes. But we do know that £3.5 billion of contracts that have been handed out by this government to their political donors, ministers, mates. And so, yes, we do need an investigation into that too. In fact, we need an investigation into every pound and penny that has been handed out, and to learn the lessons so the public money isn't wasted again. And don't forget, they had previously denied the existence of a VIP lane at all. Well, it existed all right. It allowed Conservative politicians to open doors for anyone with connections to ministers. The WhatsApp Highway Express. And earlier this year, the High Court declared it unlawful.
OK, well, that's Angela Rayner there, talking a lot about the PPE allegations. I am very lucky to still be joined after that by Lee Anderson, Conservative MP for Ashfield. Lee, before we
billions
return
of pounds
on to
of taxpayers'
an
money.
issue, there she is again. Before we return on to an issue that I think people care a little bit more about, let's just ask you about this. What's your reaction to this allegations that there's been, a VIP lane when it comes to VIP, a waste of public money for PPE?
Look, Patrick, we should always make sure that we spend public money wisely. But let me be clear on this issue. This is an Opposition Day debate today, and I can tell you that I have not received one email over the past week on this subject at all. People aren't interested. What they were interested in 2 years ago, at the time it was happening, the care homes, hospitals, all these places were running out of PPE. They had none in my care homes. They were desperate to get this stuff as soon as possible. I think it's a bit rich when people like Angela and this other Russell Moyles chap, or whatever his name is, start talking about respect and waste of taxpayers' money. They're a waste of taxpayers' money, both of them. Angela Rayner's buying AirPods, or earpods, whatever you call them, 500 quid, I think they cost. That was well publicised at the time. That's taxpayers' money. They need to start and practice what they preach.
Do you think it is enough for the Conservative Party to say, well, look, we were in a time of absolute chaos, we didn't have enough PPE? Also, as one thing that I think should be noticed as well, and noted as well, is that a lot of the PPE was made and manufactured in China. China then, some would say suspiciously, after not doing the world a favour and telling everyone that coronavirus had actually erupted in their country, then put a bit of a ring fence around PPE, and indeed some of our PPE was nicked en route through Europe by the likes of our good friends, the French. So actually, you know, was it a case of, yeah, all right, there were VIP lanes, but people needed PPE and the Tories were going to any lengths they could to just get it?
Look, no, it was difficult times, Patrick. It's like with the business support grants. People needed help and they needed it straight away. It's no good being a job's worth in times like this and going through all the red tape nonsense. This was like a wartime scenario. We had to act very, very quickly and get that PPE. You know, there'd have been having a different debate today if we'd have ticked every single box, gone through every single, argument about who was going to get which contract. We'd have a different debate today about was getting PPE out far too slow. They need to shut up and stop wasting parliamentary time and get on with the day job.
Do you think that, is there any concern that it might emerge that it was a bit of a jobs for the boys scandal, or do you think Labour is playing politics?
Yeah, of course they're playing politics, and maybe it does look like that to some people, maybe the Guardian readers amongst us and the Daily Mirror readers, but look, like I keep saying, Patrick, this country, it was desperate times, it called for desperate measures. And if we can get PPE very quick, the gowns, the masks, the shields, everything we need for our care homes and doctors, surgeons and dentists, we have to get it out there as quick as possible. And quite frankly, I'm not bothered where it comes from, as long as it saves people's lives.
OK, all right. Now, look, just got to get you on something that's been taking place, which we had you on originally to talk about as well, of course, which was the issue that was going on in the channel. I just want to get your views on whether or not you think it would be against human rights, people's human rights, to tag them if they enter this country illegally so we can track their movements.
No, I'll tell you what is against people's human rights, Patrick. The rights of the people in this country who are paying £6 to £7 million a day for a load of economic migrants to abuse our asylum system, enter here illegally, get ferried off to Manston and then ferried off in first-class coaches to four-star hotels, be given 3 meals a day. Then they got the cheek to complain about the Wi-Fi and the feedback forms on the form. That's against the rights of people in this great country of ours. We need to get it sorted and stop pandering to these namby-pamby lefty lawyers, activists and the Labour Party.
But is Rishi Sunak a bit too soft to do that, though?
I think the whole of Parliament's too soft to do it, to be honest with you, Patrick. We need to toughen up. There's lots of colleagues, myself, we've met the Home Secretary again today, who is on board. She needs a bit more backing from Parliament and Number 10 and Cabinet, to get this through. We're a soft touch. And I just don't understand why anybody can argue that France is not a safe country and that there's a legitimate case for the economic migrants to pass through France to get here. It's absolute nonsense.
All right, Lee, look, thank you very, very much. Lee Anderson now, who's Conservative MP for Ashfield, initially talking about what's been going on in the Channel, whether or not we should be tagging people who enter this country illegally, and then, of course, veering off onto PPE, as Angela Rayner rather unexpectedly apparently took to the floor in the House of Commons to waffle on about it. Anyway, GBNews' political editor Darren McCaffrey is in Westminster for us now. Darren,
standing start.
Gosh, we keep getting interrupted by the House of Commons, Darren, don't we? Anyway, there you go. What do you make of what Angela Rayner was saying there? Basically, it's a bit of a jolt to the boys scandal, potentially, isn't it? But the Tories saying that they had to do this. It was a crisis.
Yeah, you may remember that this story, in essence, actually, Patrick's been bubbling away for the last year or so. These allegations that repeatedly crop up in the Sunday Times, the Guardian, the BBC and elsewhere about potential misuse when it came to the procurement of PPE during the coronavirus crisis. Now, as Lee was pointing out there, the government have repeatedly, whether it's been Boris Johnson or Liz Truss or indeed Rishi Sunak, have defended the use of these kind of so-called VIP contracts, saying that, this was a time of national crisis. It was important in a world in which everyone was desperate to get PPE to try and get it as soon as possible. But it is also clear that lots of PPE was procured that made an awful lot of people an awful lot of money, and much of it was unused or indeed unfit to be used. And that's why Labour's piling the pressure on this, not least of all with these allegations against Michelle Mone. Who is she? She's a former entrepreneur, Scottish entrepreneur who was a bit of a celebrity, actually, back in the day when David Cameron appointed her to the House of Lords. Now, there have been allegations that essentially she has benefited from one of these VIP contracts in the past. Allegations, must be said, she has denied. But today, interestingly, she has stepped back from her role in the House of Lords, saying that she wants to request a leave of absence to clear her name, and that she is going to kind of essentially campaign or to try and challenge these allegations. Now, so far, the Conservative Party, the Prime Minister, has not withdrawn the whip from Michelle Mone. Critics would say he's too weak to do so, though, as I say, that has not happened. And she argues that these allegations are unjustifiably levelled against her. But that is in what essence has spurred on this motion that we're seeing from Angela Rayner today, this debate in Parliament. They're trying to get these emails and contracts published. Now, that could well happen because of this, because the government is not going to oppose it. Let's be honest about that. The government are going to allow this vote to go through. But in the end, I think they'll be so heavily redacted, we'll not actually learn an awful lot, hence why, to a degree, it is playing politics. But there is a police investigations into many of these deals, and they are looking into the detail of all of this. This is a story, frankly, Patrick, that is not going away, and we'll have to see whether Michelle Mone does get to that position of managing to challenge these allegations that have been, as I say, in many of the papers in recent days and weeks.
Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, just reacting to what's been going on in Parliament, which is Angela Rayner there asking a lot of pertinent questions, some would say, about the procurement of PPE. A lot of people are thinking maybe that hindsight is 20/20 when it comes to this stuff as well. You know, were the Tories just acting in a time of crisis as much as they could, throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and hoping that some of it came back, and they were in a way right to maybe go to sources that they thought they could trust. But then, of course, there are proper channels, and if a lot of that PPE was wasted, and if a lot of, let's be honest, Tories' mates got very rich off the back of it, I suppose that is a problem, isn't it? Again, yet another story with two sides to it. GB Views coming your way very, very shortly. For all of you who've been emailing in, I've been Patrick Christys, and I will continue to be so for the next half an hour or so. Coming up, at least 9 children have sadly now died of Strep A in the UK. We'll bring you all of the latest on that. Also this hour, yes, a bit more on what was our main story at the top, which is that should we be actually putting trackers on migrants entering the UK illegally? Sir Keir Starmer has come under fire for suggesting that he backs the plan that is being explored by the Tory government. It's got a lot of you going in the inbox. Make sure that you stay tuned, because I will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, it's 5:30. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Downing Street has declined to reveal if the Prime Minister is worried about patients dying due to NHS strikes. It's after 3 unions announced that thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff will walk out across England and Wales on the 21st and 28th of December. In a joint statement, GMB, Unison and Unite accused the government of ignoring pleas for a decent pay rise. However, Health Secretary Steve Barclay responded, saying unions' demands are not affordable. A man has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by King Charles in Luton. Bedfordshire police say the suspect, aged in his 20s, was arrested after an egg was thrown in the direction of the monarch. King Charles was seen being guided away from the crowds by his security team following that incident. The King had been in Luton to meet community leaders and voluntary organisations. Baroness Monet is taking a leave of absence from the House of Lords following allegations that she benefited from a COVID PPE deal. It's alleged that Michelle Monet and her children received millions of pounds after she recommended a company to government ministers at the height of the pandemic. Baroness Monet has denied the allegations. The decision means she'll not attend sittings of the House and won't be able to claim any allowance. The Health Secretary has told the House of Commons we are seeing an earlier peak in Strep A cases than usual, but there is no new strain. At least 9 children have died from the bacterial infection in the UK since September. The latest is a 5-year-old from Belfast. The government says antibiotics could be given to children at schools affected by Strep A as a preventative measure. England's rugby head coach, Eddie Jones, has been sacked after 7 years in the job. Under his leadership, England won 3 Six Nations titles and got to the final of the 2019 World Cup in Japan. However, this season has been England's worst performance since 2008. His former number 2, Leicester's director of rugby, Steve Borthwick, has been tipped to replace him. We're on TV, online and on DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere because Patrick is coming right back.
OK, people, loads to go out today. Very shortly, we'll be returning to what has been our top story this hour, apart from the strikes, of course, which is whether or not we should be tagging people who arrive here illegally. But before that, very, very serious story. There's cases of Strep A have skyrocketed in the UK, with now, sadly, at least 9 children dying of the disease. The UK Health Security Agency has warned that the long-term impact of the COVID lockdown policy has contributed to higher rates of infection during the typical scarlet fever season. The outbreak also comes at a time of great strain for the NHS, with figures released today showing that over 5 million people failed to get a GP appointment in October, double the amount of failed appointments this time last year. Joining me now is Dr Lawrence Buckman, former chairman of the British Medical Association's GP Committee. Dr Lawrence, great to see you again. Lots for us to talk about here. Let's just start initially with the... Well, can we just start very quickly with the Strep A stuff? I mean, how concerned should people be? We're hearing talks of antibiotics just en masse now for kids generally at schools where this has been effective. Is it a massive concern? Is it all lockdown's fault? What's going on?
No, it's very simple. Strep A turns up every year in waves. Most people who get it are barely harmed by it, but a tiny number are greatly harmed by it. And of course, if there's a huge wave, then inevitably some of them are going to get the serious forms of Strep A, which is lethal. And the main trick is to spot it in the early stages when it looks like a sore throat or diarrhea or occasionally skin blisters. And I must say the decision to at least think about putting every affected child and every child in a school where there is an affected child on penicillin is a good one. And it makes economic sense. And it will also prevent those very few cases that end in disaster.
OK, that's the Strep A stuff out of the way now. Let's just talk about something that, well, I'm not going to say it's affecting more people because Strep A is incredibly serious, but if 5 million people in the last month weren't able to get a GP's appointment, I would dare to say it's going to affect more people. This is a huge concern. And can you explain the plight of the GP to me? Because we're hearing about the plight of care workers, we're hearing about nurses, we're hearing about hospital porters, we're hearing about paramedics, emergency care workers, 999 call handlers. But a GP on 100 and something grand a year who wants to work 9 to 5, it would appear people are a bit annoyed they can't get an appointment.
Yes, that's because there's not enough GPs and too many people want appointments. The number of appointments available has gone up in the last year. In other words, more appointments are being given face-to-face. Yet there are not enough GPs to deliver to the number of people who, quite rightly, want to be seen. 5 million people made a phone call to the surgery and didn't end up with an appointment with a GP.
Right.
And I understand why they're miffed.
Yeah, exactly that. But is it because some people decide that they want to go into the medical profession? It's, you know, yes, OK, a worthy, well-regarded profession. It's also can be quite lucrative. And then they use the NHS initially as a GP and then they go private. And so we're seeing more GPs going private than staying in the NHS. Is that correct or not?
No, I don't think that's quite true. I think most GPs go into the business because they like to be GPs. You become a GP because you want patients to like you. And they're not going to like you if you don't give them anything. So I think that theory that you only do it for a while and then go and get rich, I don't know many people who do that. It is true some GPs are quitting general practice on the NHS and going privately. That's a picture of me, by the way. They give up general practice and go private. But the vast majority don't do that. They stay at the coalface, beavering away, and fighting against impossible odds. There are too many people who need to be seen. I'm not suggesting any one of those people is anything other than needy, but there aren't enough of us to deliver to the number of people who quite reasonably want to be seen.
Is there actually a problem, a systemic problem there? Because apparently, according to this report, which, by the way, the government completely refutes, it must be said, there is I've very rarely covered a story where there's been such a complete polar opposite. There was a report commissioned by the Labour Party, as far as I can tell. 5 million people a month unable to book a GP appointment, millions of people left waiting over a month. And then the government came out and just went, this absolutely isn't true whatsoever. But there we go. I imagine the truth is somewhere in the middle. But people saying that they can't book a GP's appointment that far in advance. They have to book it on the day and then there aren't any appointments on the day. Is that not a procedural problem? Isn't that quite easy? Just allow people to book in advance?
Yes, it's a target problem. If you have to meet certain targets for the Department of Health, then that means you see people in a particular way and not in other ways. So many practices have reached the point that the only way they can deliver to people who say they're ill today is to say we'll make no advance booking appointments and we will only see people who phone on the day. I'm not saying I think that's a good idea, but I understand how that happens. You have to meet that target. Nobody sick today is turned away, and that means you've got to do tricks in order to do that.
Can I just very quickly ask you a question that I am really pleading for absolute honesty on? Because I don't think this question gets asked enough. When doctors GPs earn their average salary, the incentive for them to work overtime, a lot of the time, from the pay scale that I can see, is removed because you would move into a squishy middle ground in our tax bracket where you are taxed at, roughly speaking, about 60% of what you would earn for that overtime. Therefore, some would argue making it not worth their while. Overtime is needed to clear this backlog. GPs won't do it because they'll be taxed to high hell if they do.
I don't think that's the reason. The reason why GPs, some of them can't cope anymore is because they say the work is too hard. I don't say that, but I understand why they do. And you don't make more money this way because the NHS will hold you to your nose to the grindstone if you haven't seen the right number of people. They won't let you get away with walking off the pitch when they're queuing outside the door.
OK, look, Dr Lawrence, thank you very much. Dr Lawrence Buttman there, former chairman of the British Medical Association's GP committee, just responding to the fact that apparently 5 million people were unable to get a GP's appointment in the last month alone. The Department of Health and Social Care has responded to claims. I alluded to this earlier. Get a load of this. They say straightforwardly this analysis is inaccurate. The survey was published in July this year using indicative data, and since then it's been confirmed there were 36 million appointments carried out in October, a 5.3% increase on the same time last year. And there we go. Right, so basically a complete and utter rebuttal to all of this. Now, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. It's been reported that army staff are being trained to cover striking workers, including firefighters and ambulance drivers. And throughout the day, we've been discussing whether or not you think it's right that we should be tagging illegal immigrants. Some people say it's against their human rights. Other people say, well, actually, it's reasonable and it will contribute to public safety. GBViews at gbnews.uk. I'm going to be back in just a tick. Don't go anywhere. We'll be discussing those two top topics.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. OK, we're going to rattle through the back end of this show. 'Tis the season to strike, apparently. That's the latest bout of industrial action that's been announced over the festive period. Well, it shouldn't really be called the festive period, should it, if it's been ruined? But anyway, earlier it was announced that ambulance workers will go ahead with strikes on December the 21st and the 28th. We can add that to the posties, we can add that to the nurses. It comes amid the RMT's rejection of the most recent pay offer. This is, of course, on the railways. The government said its focus remains on mitigating the impact of strike action on the public as they've been training troops to firefight and drive ambulances. Hopefully they can drive trains as well as part of preparations for mass worker walkouts ahead. Well, the RMT, this is the Mick Lynch Brigade, they've claimed to have a mandate for their action, which has aggravated members of the public. Involved in a spat with the Rail Workers Union earlier today, Ed McGuinness, ex-British Army officer and president of the Conservatives in the city, argued that the tyranny of the unions was unwarranted, as the government also has a mandate to act. I'm very pleased to say he joins me now. Thank you very much. Welcome to the studio. Great to have you on. Now, Mick Lynch says that he's got a mandate, presumably from his members, that would be in order to go on strike. Does he?
No, I would suggest that the 35,000 members that he claims voted for the strike action are far outweighed by the 14.1 million people that voted for the Conservative Party to give rail workers a fair pay deal but not have them disrupt the lives of ordinary working people.
Do you think that if it's the taxpayer paying, potentially, for pay rises for some of these people, the taxpayer should get a vote on what that pay rise is?
No, I feel that there's a negotiation process in place, but that negotiation has to be held in good faith. And when you're negotiating with a party who, when offered a pay deal of 8% plus no redundancies for 2 years, turns around and says, no, we don't want this pay deal. We're actually going to implement more strikes that will disrupt people's lives even further over the Christmas period. The first one that we've actually had post-COVID, stopping people being able to go and see their families, stopping people being able to go to work, essential workers being able to go to work.
Yeah.
I think that you can't negotiate with a gun held to your head.
No, and I think it's important to stress the massive, massive differences between the different people who are striking. Nurses, ambulance workers, paramedics, emergency care workers, 999 call workers, etc. If they go on strike, then there is a much wider impact, potentially, to public health and safety. You would hope so, otherwise they weren't doing their job particularly well to begin with. And there are more moral consequences with that. But with the healthcare strikes, there are also different issues, because those people apparently are struggling with recruitment and retention in a way that, as I understand it, does not exist when it comes to the rail workers. So actually, do you think that out of all of the people striking, the rail workers have the least mandate to strike in the public eye? Because supposedly they can already fill the jobs anyway. People are queuing up to work for them.
I would tend to agree with you that there is a spectrum of need and of strike action and where the legitimacy lies. And what I would say is that this is more about a negotiating mandate and is more about being able to negotiate in good faith. There are militant unions, such as the RMT, that don't negotiate in good faith, clearly, but I think some of the other unions, some of the more sensible ones, are up for that challenge.
There is the argument that Mick Lynch is just doing his job. So Mick Lynch is essentially tasked with getting the best deal he possibly can for the people who he represents, and he is doing that job to the best of his abilities right now by bringing it right to the wire. And has the situation changed with this cost of living crisis and inflation at unprecedented levels?
Well, clearly the situation has changed, and the government and the operating companies for the rail operating group have recognised that change. They have put an offer to the RMT of 8% over 2 years with no redundancies before 2024, with some reforms baked into that. That is a starting point for negotiation. It is not a starting point to escalate your strike action around a time when people want to...
Do you think Mick Lynch is absolutely loving this?
I think it's more about the Mick Lynch than it is about aiding his hard-working trade union members, yes.
Do you think this is an eco trip by Mick Lynch?
I do. I think as the strikes have escalated and carried on, he has become really the face of this rather than his hard-working union members.
All right, look, thank you very much. Great to have you in the studio, and thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. That's Ed McGuinness there, ex-British Army officer and president of the Conservatives in the city, who got into a bit of a spat with the RMT, and there you go. Anyway, right, turning now to that trailer for the highly anticipated Netflix Meghan and Harry docu-series which has been released. It contains scenes of the Prince claiming that he and his wife know the whole truth about all the royal scandals. It has already hit headlines, the apparent use of unrelated press footage. We are already seeing utter utter lies in this. The first episodes are to be released this Thursday on Netflix. I will just hold my hands up in the air. I am a massive hypocrite. I really don't like them. I don't think they should be doing this, but of course I will be watching it, along with millions of other people. Joining me now is Grant Harold, former royal butler. Grant, thank you very, very much. Now, I understand that you knew a young Prince Harry and you no doubt are quite close to him. This must bring a tear to your eye to see him shamelessly lying to the British public in a way that he's doing to... Is he not just simping up to a woman who might just leave him one day anyway?
Do you know, it's tricky, Patrick. Thanks for having you on the show. As you mentioned, you know, when you watch it, it is difficult because I kind of feel drawn in the middle with this because obviously I love our royal family. I was proud to work for them. I knew Harry really well. I didn't know Meghan. And it's just, I've been obviously following what they've been saying over the past couple of years. And I think what's different for me, Patrick, is there's things that they say and part of me can believe some of the things they say, and other parts, of course, just don't make sense.
What don't you believe, Grant? What bits do you find hard to get your head around?
Just little things that I've heard them say, you know, thinking back to when they kind of sat down and did that kind of interview and talked about, you know, how, from my point of view, you know, when they were saying about how they've got these schedules and how, you know, trying to get in touch with his father and these kind of things. And I remember when I worked for the family, as I'm sure you're aware, the schedules are pretty full on, and it's not the easiest thing to get in touch with them. So, you know, there's little things like that they were saying, and I thought, okay, I can understand that. But as you said, there's other bits that they've said that just don't add up. I've been made aware today that in the trailer there's always a photograph that's been used. Correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but it's a sea of photographers, and I think it's from the Harry Potter. Yeah, so it's not from that, and that's difficult for me because then I'm trying to say all those bits. I think, you know, where he's obviously just kind of trying to stand up, but then something like that happens, and it's a bit awkward because you do wonder why would they put something like that in there? Why? Because it's obviously that is false.
Yeah, no, indeed. Now, look, was Prince Harry always quite an impressionable, vulnerable, and not particularly mentally astute chap? Do you think he's easily led?
No, this is what's so confusing because the Prince Harry that I knew was quite he was quite I say sensible. I mean, he was a teenager, early 20s, and like any other kid his age, he was just like that. But he wasn't easily. You couldn't have kind of said something. You know, he had his own mind, his own opinion, how he wanted to do things.
Yeah.
And see, the other thing is, he did got on really well with his family. You know, he got on really well with his father. And got on really well with his late grandmother. So that's one of the examples when he said he didn't have that relationship. He did have a close relationship. So I don't understand those little bits.
Grant, thank you very, very much. No doubt this will not be the last time I talk to you about this. I really do appreciate you making the time for us. You are a favourite of mine here on GBNews. Grant Harold there, the former royal butler. Look, I'll just say this very quickly before we move on, and time will tell whether or not I'm right. I think Prince Harry is doing something that I've seen a lot of my mates do in the past, which is when they start going out with someone, they ditch their mates, they ditch their family, and then, you know what? When she leaves him, they always come crawling back. Right, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has said that he supports tracking asylum seekers with GPS tags in some particular cases. Earlier this year, the government rolled out electronic tagging for some migrants. We're pressed for time, so I'll just crack straight on with this because I'm asking whether or not you think it's ethical that asylum seekers or people who come here illegally, depending on which way you want to look at it, should be tagged. And I'm joined in the studio by immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. Ivan, thank you very, very much. People are saying this is psychological torture. It's against the human rights of these people. Your view, should we tag them?
We can tag them under the law.
Right.
So, look, there's two choices. Either we keep them in detention. Look, we've got people coming across the channel. We don't know who they are, don't know where they come from. And if you came at the airport, you'd never be let into the country if you didn't have an identity document. We do for people coming across the channel. So there's two choices. Do we detain them for long periods, or do we tag them? And remember, many asylum seekers disappear in the system. And because their asylum applications are taking years to decide, and the cost of that we're having about putting people up in hotels is because of the length of time taking to decide their cases. So I think if I had a choice of being detained or being tagged.
Yeah.
I'd rather be tagged.
Well, tagging could be a solution, frankly, that works for everyone in a sense, because I think a lot of people around migrant hotels are concerned about seeing these people maybe wandering around. There are concerns about whether or not every single one of them comes back in the evening. Everyone would have concerns about that. But also for the migrants themselves, they wouldn't want to be held up in detention centres. They would want to be able to have that freedom, potentially, and a tag just solves all of those issues.
Indeed, and the courts are familiar with it, because if you're applying for bail in detention, one of the conditions the court quite often imposes on someone seeking bail is that they're tagged. Well, the Home Office asks for that condition. And again, someone in detention has a choice of either agreeing to that or saying, well, no, I want to be staying. No, so I think tagging is absolutely justified in these circumstances.
And do you think that actually when it comes to just the general level of human rights for these people, I mean, yeah, I can understand why people would be thinking, well, maybe it's a visible sign that, you know, they could be criminalised almost by doing this. But some people are saying, well, if you're going to come here and accept free bed and board at a 4-star hotel and maybe have the benefits of living in this country one day, it was just a small period of time where you're wearing a tag, and suck it up. If you're fleeing war, it's not the end of the world, is it?
But asylum seekers are not asking for 4-star hotels. The Home Office is putting them up in there. And remember, the problem is the length of time of decision-making. So if we had a system where things were decided quickly, which used to be the case when I first started advising clients...
Was that because they had fewer cases, though?
No, they had... In fact, they had twice as many cases.
What, before people started coming across the channel in record
numbers? Yes. In late 1990s, there were over 100,000 cases a year. The Home Office dealt with them efficiently. Within 6 months, you had a decision. So the problem they have is not enough staff, funding, training, proper adequate training, good decision-making. Quite often, a lot of these immigration officers making decisions are just not up to the task. So you're getting appeals from those poor decision-making.
OK.
Then that clogs up the court system. So really, we need a proper system, an efficient way of deciding asylum applications.
Look, thank you very much, Ivan. Great to have you in the studio. Ivan Sampson there, who is an immigration lawyer, just reacting to that news that, yes, it does appear that both parties may well agree that we should be tagging people who come over here so we can keep tabs on them. And also, well, maybe it's the best of both worlds. Jubes & Co. is up next. Michelle Dewberry is right here in the studio. What you got coming up, Michelle?
Hello, Patrick. Yeah, I mean, myself as a mother, I'm very concerned about this whole Strep A thing. Yet more children have been dying as a result of that. It's been discussed now, the fact that lockdowns have contributed to this, and it makes me wonder, have we sacrificed our children's health in order to protect the vulnerable in this society? Was that the right approach? And 15-minute cities, I like the sound of them. In principle, everything that you need on your doorstep, brilliant. But how do you go about enforcing these? When you start talking about having to register your car, having number plates, recognition, having permits, and a restriction on how many times you can leave your so-called zone, you lose me on that one, I've got to be honest. So I want to talk about that. Is this the future of cities, or is it just a ridiculous idea? And the royals, are they bending to social pressure? You've got King Charles now saying that he'll meet someone that says they were a victim of racism. What's going on? And of course, strikes threatening our Christmas of being together. Is that right, or is it all going a bit too far?
Oh, geez, you've hit the nail on the head there with pretty much everything as per usual. But there's absolutely no good that will come out of King Charles and Queen Camilla meeting on Gozi Fulani or whatever, because let's be honest with you, she's already got an agenda there, in my view. Anyway, Michelle Dewberry, thank you very much. With Jubes & Co. That's up next. Thank you very much for everyone who's tuned in. I've been Patrick Christys. This has been and will continue to be GB News. I'll be back again tomorrow from 3 p.m. But yes, make sure that you stay exactly where you are, because Michelle Dewberry will be whizzing you through the next hour. Stay tuned.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Brighter skies for many of us today compared with the last few days, but there are some showers around and it is feeling cold. It's going to turn even colder. Winds now changing to a northerly direction, replacing the easterlies that we have seen. Now, the easterlies brought chilly weather, but the northerlies will bring even colder conditions over the next few days. They're also bringing clearer conditions. That's why the skies have been clearing in the south and the west through the day. But we've seen cloud for Northern Ireland, Northern Scotland, Eastern England, a few showers in places as well. Overnight, those showers will turn to more of a wintry nature as the cold air sets in. Some flakes of snow over the higher parts of Eastern England, for example, but more significant snow expected for the north of Scotland, where it's going to feel very cold by the end of the night. A touch of frost across many western areas elsewhere. Frost-free in the southeast, and for some places exposed to the northerly. But wherever you are, it is a cold start to Wednesday. A bright start, nevertheless, for northern and western England, Wales, as well as Northern Ireland. I think, again, a bit more cloud in the east and the north with showers. But for northern Scotland, those showers will be frequent, they'll be heavy, and they'll be composed of snow. So the snow building up from the north of Scotland, 5 centimetres at lower levels, 10 centimetres over the hills, for example. And the snow and some icy patches continues into Wednesday night. As showers come and go for the east of England through Wednesday nights, as well as Northern Ireland, parts of West Wales, we'll see some icy patches first thing Thursday. Otherwise, a widespread frost, clear skies and temperatures well below freezing widely across the UK, with lows of -5, -6, -7 Celsius in some of the chillier spots. But plenty of bright skies for many. Plenty of sunshine first thing Thursday, despite that chill in the air. Temperatures only slowly recovering through the morning. We'll see further sleet, snow showers in places, mainly eastern and northern coastal areas through Friday and into the weekend.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Jubes & Co, the show where we'll get into the things that have got you talking today. Now, the latest death toll is 9 children that have died because of Strep A. Health experts are saying that lockdowns did indeed play a part in all of this. Goodness me. I can't help but ponder, have we basically sacrificed the health of our youngest children in order to save the elderly, the vulnerable in this country from COVID? Was that the right approach? And 15-minute cities, I like the idea of that, quite frankly. You've got everything you need on the doorstep, but how far do you go in your quest to enforce that? One council is basically saying you can have permits and you can have a certain amount of numbers of times that you can leave your own district. Sounds a bit weird to me. All in favour of saving the planet. Would you be up for it or not? And the royals, King Charles is going to meet the lady that says that she was a victim of racism. Is that the right approach, or is it the royals bowing to public pressure? And strikes. After years basically of having our Christmases restricted, finally we're allowed to come and do as we please, but those pesky strikers have other ideas. Is it right that basically across the Christmas period the strikes will be taking place? Do you support it or not? We'll have all that to come, but first let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Downing Street has declined to reveal if the Prime Minister is worried about patients dying due to NHS strikes. It's after 3 unions announced that thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff will walk out across England and Wales on the 21st and 28th of December. In a joint statement, GMB, Unison and Unite unions accused the government of ignoring pleas for a decent pay rise. However, Health Secretary Steve Barclay responded, saying unions' demands are not affordable. One Kassab is the national lead officer at Unite. He says patients' lives are already at risk.
Only 25% of shifts have the planned staff actually on that shift. There are 133,000 vacancies across the NHS in England alone. And what our members are telling us is that lives are being put at risk now and that people are dying now because of the state of the service.
A man has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by King Charles in Luton. Bedfordshire police say the suspect, aged in his 20s, was arrested in St George's Square after an egg was thrown in the direction of the monarch. King Charles was seen being guided away from the crowds by his security team following the incident. The King had been in Luton to meet community leaders and voluntary organisations. Baroness Monet is to take a leave of absence from the House of Lords following allegations that she benefited from a COVID PPE deal. It's alleged that Michelle Monet and her children received millions of pounds after she recommended a company to government ministers at the height of the pandemic. Baroness Monet has denied the allegations. The decision means she will no longer attend sittings of the House and won't be able to claim any allowance. Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner says the PM should remove the whip from the Baroness, but he's too weak.
She saw the writing on the wall and did what she feels she needs to, but it shows also that the Prime Minister is still not tackling the problems we face that was around this VIP illegal fast-track lane that he put in his procurement strategy on how they receive goods, and that's still a problem to this day that the Prime Minister is still not dealing with.
The Health Secretary has told the House of Commons we're seeing an earlier peak in Strep A cases than usual, but there is no new strain. At least 9 children have died from the bacterial infection in the UK since September. The latest is a 5-year-old from Belfast. The government says antibiotics could be given to children at schools affected by Strep A as a preventative measure. NHS GP Dr Veena Babu is urging parents to be on the lookout for symptoms.
If you're a parent with a young child, look up the symptoms, have a look at Google images of what the skin rashes look like, have the information at your fingertips. If you can't get hold of your GP, there's 111. Most practices have either e-consults, text messages, telephone calls. Worst case scenario when your child is unwell, of course take them to A&E and the paediatric department will help. So I think as parents, you need to empower yourself with the information and act quickly.
7 more cases of diphtheria have been recorded among migrants in England, bringing the total for the year to 57. The UK Health Security Agency published the figures following reports of fresh cases at Manston Processing Centre in Kent. The cases, discovered between November 28th and December 4th, mark an increase from the previous week, where only 5 new cases were diagnosed. Last week, the Immigration Minister told MPs that asylum seekers with diphtheria symptoms would be put into isolation. England's rugby head coach, Eddie Jones, has been sacked after 7 years in the job. Under his leadership, the England team took 3 Six Nations titles and got to the final of the 2019 World Cup in Japan. However, this season has been England's worst performance since 2008. His former number 2, Leicester's director of rugby, Steve Borthwick, has been tipped to replace him. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is the People's Channel, GB News. Back now to Tubes & Co.
Hello there, welcome back to Tubes & Co. With me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got Dominique Samuels, the writer and broadcaster, and the journalist and political commentator, Joe Phillips. Good evening, ladies. Ladies' night tonight, I like it. You know the drill, don't you, as well? It's not just about us here tonight, it's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? I want all of your thoughts. Just a reminder, I want to talk about Strep A. I want to talk about postcode lockdowns, some people are calling them. 15-minute cities, great idea if you ask me, but getting a little bit weird when it comes to how you're going to enforce them. Should someone be able to tell you how often you can leave your own zone? God, that was a tough one for my accent. Anyway, no is the short answer to me. No, you shouldn't be able to do that. I want to talk about the Royals meeting with a lady that claimed racism. Is that the kind of the future now? Or is it kind of the Royals bowing to public pressure and striking over Christmas? Goodness me, haven't we had enough of our Christmas plans being interrupted? Last time by the government, this time by strikers. Are you still on the side of the strikers? Do you think it is all justified, actually? Because a lot of people struggling in this day and age. Give me all your thoughts. GBViews at gbnews.uk. You can tweet me as well at GBNews. Many of you pointing out, by the way, it's not just Oxford that are doing these kind of 15-minute cities. Someone else has been in touch with their city as well, is doing something similar as a trial. Is yours? Tell me. I want your thoughts on that. But first of all, I've got to say, one of the most important stories, certainly to me personally, as a mum to a young child, and I suspect if you have a young child yourself or a young grandchild, this will be high up on your agenda as well, of course, because 9 children are confirmed to have died from Strep A in recent weeks. The latest one you've just been hearing in the news there, a 5-year-old who sadly passed away in Belfast. I mean, can you imagine what these parents must be going through? The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, believes the rise in infections is a consequence of COVID lockdowns. Let's have a listen.
We are seeing an earlier peak than usual in terms of cases, these cases, and we believe this is due to lower exposure during the pandemic, which has then meant to lower immunity. There is no new strain.
Interesting stuff. Dominique, your thoughts on some of this?
I think it's unforgivable and despicable that people were sold this lie about the effectiveness of lockdowns, and those that were opposed to this and warned that it would lead to excess deaths, it would lead to people being more susceptible to actually more serious illnesses. We were shut down as conspiracy theorists, as granny killers. But as we're seeing now, we've got children dying of Strep A when we know that they wouldn't have been as susceptible to such illnesses if they were actually allowed to mix with other children. We've got the likes of Chris Whitty even admitting now that excess deaths are as a result of our COVID pandemic response, aka lockdowns, and that more people are going to be dying of cancer, for example. So I feel like people like me, not to score points, but we were sort of proven right in a way, and it's just sad that people have to die excessively for that point to be proven.
Yeah, and I've already had someone, I must say I've just lost your name because lots of emails fly in and it gets nudged around, but I've got someone that's just come in on my inbox saying, "Ugh, Michelle, are you talking about anti-lockdown stuff yet again?" I've got to be honest, yeah, I am, quite frankly, because I think this is such an important topic, because going forward, we're going to have other ailments, we're going to have other situations, and I think it's so crucial to have these kind of conversations, because I don't think we should ever sleepwalk ever again into these whole blanket lockdowns with pretty much zero consideration for the consequences, unintended, of course. I don't think anyone would intend for this to happen, but the unintended consequences and the knock-on effects of these things. Where do you stand on it, Jo?
Well, I don't want to go round the houses again on lockdown or not, because I think, you know, with hindsight, we would perhaps all wish that things might have been different. And I think, you know, the COVID inquiry, when it publishes its full report, will show properly, one hopes, the true effects of it. And yes, it is inevitable that people were going to not be able to see doctors, not be able to get treatment during lockdown. I think, just to put it into context, the thing that worries me most about this Strep A and these tragic deaths of these children, Strep A, as the health expert was saying earlier in the news bulletin, you know, it's not unusual, but it is quite unusual for it to become fatal. But what's really worrying is that there is a shortage of penicillin. And there is an idea that's been put around today by health ministers that perhaps there would be a sort of a blanket antibiotic treatment of whole year groups in schools. Well, we're coming up to the end of the school term for the Christmas holidays, so whether or not that happens remains to be seen. But if you've got a shortage of penicillin and you're then using amoxicillin, and I'm sure there'll be somebody out there who's a medical expert who will correct me if I'm wrong on this, that is also used to treat things like bronchial pneumonia. What is worrying is that if we know we have a problem, and, you know, not again to go back through lockdown, but where is the planning for events like this, where you need supplies of medicine and you need to react quickly? And the other problem, of course, is, you know, can people, and, you know, my children are grown up now, but as any parent with young kids, you worry about the slightest thing, whether it's going to turn into something deadly. You know, do you go straight to hospital? Do you call the doctor? Do you go back home?
Well, everything's backlogged, though, and so you can't. But you can't talk about this issue without talking about the issue of lockdown. It didn't take hindsight for many people, including medical professionals, to say that this actually wasn't the right approach.
No, I know.
Now, as you've said, we've got a shortage of penicillin. Yes. If people want to take the kids to go see a GP, they're going to struggle unless they decide to go private. So I actually think we do have to talk about it. It's not rehashing it, but it's making sure that those that push such a dangerous and harmful policy are held accountable, and we must make sure it doesn't happen again, because it didn't take a genius to work out what the collateral damage would be. You don't have to be an expert, you just have to be someone with common sense.
What also you don't have to be a genius to be is to work out that all local authorities and government, including all the emergency services, regularly have crisis management planning training. And all that was talked about, you know, whether it was a terror attack, nobody saw COVID coming until it was sort of there in China and then coming over across to Europe.
Well,
but nobody has ever bothered. Successive governments have not implemented the recommendations that have come out of those exercises. We've heard Kate Bingham, head of the Vaccine Task Force, last week, giving evidence in Parliament, saying, why are they now dismantling the one thing that we did get right, which was to get the vaccines and get them out quickly, whether or not you agree with the vaccines, but we did it quickly. And we managed to get something that was working a lot better than other countries in the world. And I just think, you know, we've got a government that's selling stuff off. They've sold off that Oxford Centre. They've sold it to the Americans. They're dismantling it. They're talking about dismantling the COVID fraud task force. We've got a shortage of penicillin. We knew that we were going to have shortages of drugs. Nothing has been done to try and prevent those problems.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
If we agree, that's awful. We've got to go home now.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we haven't go to the pub. See you later. I wouldn't object to that. But no, it is. It's worrying because as a mom, you know,
it's awful.
Yeah, you've got to trust your mother's instincts. You've got to trust your mother's instinct. And it used to be the case that if your kid was ill, you could pick up the phone. You know, let's hope we never need to, but you could pick up the phone. You could get an ambulance. And you could get your child to hospital and hopefully treated. But even that now, you cannot take that for granted. That service is going to be available to you.
You know, one of the children who is, I believe, still in intensive care, was taken to hospital, was admitted to hospital, but having been sent home from hospital with steroids.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's no guarantee. I know, you know, when you're a parent, there is nothing that churns you up more than thinking, is this sniffle going to turn into something else? Is this rash meningitis? Is this going to, you know, it's awful.
Do you know what I don't understand about this whole kind of ambulance backlog and the bed space? Like, I'm sure someone somewhere will tell me why this is not happening, but to me, the most common sense approach here, a lot of people, ambulances are turning up, they can't offload their patients because there's no bed space. One of the reasons there's no bed space is because there's an awful lot of, it sounds a crass term, but I'll use it anyway, bed blockers. So people that are medically well enough to be discharged, but they're not able to be discharged. So then I can't help but think, why haven't we got a situation now where we've effectively replicated the so-called Nightingale hospitals? You build these Nightingale hospitals, you don't need intensely medical staff because a lot of these people are not medically desperately unwell.
You need something like the old-fashioned cottage hospitals where people who are not, you know, maybe need a little bit of help, perhaps of their personal care, perhaps they're a bit unsteady on their feet or they've got limbs in plaster or whatever. You need that halfway house place. But you need the staff, Michelle, and we haven't got the staff.
Yeah. Yes, but you can recruit. This is what I'm not getting my head around.
You can't recruit.
If somebody's not medically unwell, i.e. you don't need to be in hospital, so I'm not talking about sick people, I'm talking about the people that don't need to be in hospital, but they cannot be discharged because the services are not available to them. If those people can be relocated into, say, let's call it the Nightingale Hospital, they're not desperately unwell. So the staff that you need, they're not, you know, intensely medical qualified.
But there's a shortage of people working in care homes and you know, the care that goes out.
Well, there's also an awful lot of unemployed people. So what are they doing? Why don't they start having to...
Well, we did sack thousands for not taking the vaccine.
This is very true. I think they should be reinstated.
But you've also got, you know, people who are their carers going into people's homes. They're on minimum wage very often. In many, many cases, they're having to drive from place to place to place. They've got very short time to see people. They might be the only person that elderly or vulnerable person sees throughout a day. They're having to do that. They're getting paid 25 pence a mile to drive their own car.
I know.
I mean, would you do that? No, you go and work in Tesco's or Sainsbury's.
Why do we?
So why do we treat the people that we need so much so badly? And then why are we surprised when people like firefighters and nurses and rail staff go on strike?
You make a very good point, Joe Phillips, and I'll be coming to the strikes, by the way. At the end of the programme, I want your thoughts on some of these strikes. Your Christmas is potentially going to be impacted now. If you're someone that wants to travel to see your loved ones, you might struggle if the strikes go ahead as planned. Are you OK with that? Are you on the side of the strikers for the reasons we've just been discussing? Tell me your thoughts. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your feedback on that first topic. And also, over in Oxford, they've got this 15-minute city concept now. Fine, not a problem, sounds good, have everything you need on the doorstep. But what lengths should they go to restrict you from leaving said 15-minute city? Tell me your thoughts, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Jubes & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock this evening alongside me, Dominique Samuels, the writer and the broadcaster, and political commentator, Joe Phillips. Welcome back, everybody. Lots of you are in contact about that first topic. Richie says, yes, Michelle, lockdowns are responsible for Strep A. The lockdowns has weakened people's immunity. They should never have happened. He says, I am one of the vulnerable that the lockdown was meant to save. I'm 69 years old now. Oh, this is a bit... you say you would rather have died rather than us have a lockdown because you feel you would have preferred to save the young children. You say you've had their life, your life, and the children's are just beginning. Goodness me. Delia has just written in saying, Michelle, my beautiful 35-year-old granddaughter died of Strep A yesterday, leaving 3 children aged 2, 4 and 6. We are devastated as a family. She says, please, can you make it known to people that adults as well as children can contract this? Goodness me, I'm sorry to hear that. And I have to say, that hadn't even entered my thoughts about adults. So, of course, thoughts with anyone that is affected by this. Right, let's move on to Oxford. Do you live there? Have you been there? I have. It's a beautiful place. About to get less beautiful, perhaps, if you live there, because they've approved a trial scheme now, basically, to divide the city up into 6, what they call 15-minute neighbourhoods. I have to say, I like the concept of a 15-minute neighbourhood because basically what it means is anything that you need will be accessible 15 minutes away. Brilliant if you can get into it anyway. But yeah, great concept. But how do you kind of control this, police this? Should you even be attempting to police it and control it? When you start talking like that, you cross the line for me, I've got to say. Anyway, these zones, if you want to cross zones, you're going to be restricted to 100 trips per year. Your car is going to be have its, the registration number paid attention to, monitored by cameras, and you'll be fined if indeed you do breach that 100 trips per year. Bit weird to me. I wouldn't be happy with that. But Joe Phillips,
it's got a bit of a whiff of Big Brother about it.
A bit,
just a bit.
I mean, this seems to 15-minute cities have been talked about for a long time, and they are a brilliant idea. As you say, if you can, in fact, make them work. And they're very popular in continental Europe, where they have a much better approach to traffic generally. They're trying to do the same thing in Canterbury, near where I live. And it's, frankly, not as extreme as this plan in Oxford, but it's quite ridiculous because to get from one side of the city to another, to school, let's say, or to a railway station, you're going to go through 3 zones. The thing about Oxford is that I saw something about they want to have some sort of electronic gates.
I think,
checkpoint.
Well, I've got to say, in fairness, I was looking at one of the councillors involved in this, and she was actually saying on places like Twitter that has all been misrepresented, and that these electric gates are not for cars. It's more about buses and things like that. So that's to be fair to them, that's what she was saying. Dominique, where are you on it?
I just think these sorts of control tactics are dressed up in the name of environmentalism, but I think it's authoritarianism, if I'm being honest. It's about controlling people. It's about tracking people. We know that people's number plates are going to be tracked to make sure that they're taking these specific number of trips a year. And unless people actually start saying, no, hang on a minute, I don't want to be in a form of climate lockdown to save the planet, then these things are going to continue to happen. The travel chief of Oxford Council said it's going to happen whether people like it or not. That, to me, doesn't sound very democratic at all.
Yeah, because the point you're making there, they had a vote on this, I think it was on the 29th of November, and then in an interview before that, the person you're referring to did say something along the lines of, this is going to happen, which is not, as you say, very democratic.
And this is, can I just one last point? And this isn't just, you know, one thing about the quote-unquote 15-minute city. People are referring to it as a climate lockdown. I think that's what it is. But there are people that are far more extreme. There's one company called Arup, and it's been praised on the World Economic Forum's website. They've suggested things like this, but they've even suggested things like people only being allowed to purchase a limited amount of clothes per year. All of this is wrapped up in this idea that we need to save the planet. You'd be stupid if you think that billionaires and the super rich suddenly care about the planet. What they really want is control, and they want to line their own pockets. And we are going to suffer as a result.
Well, I won't be suffering as a result, because I wouldn't actually let someone dictate to me how many clothes I can and can't buy and where I can and can't go. And I find this quite interesting, that I almost feel like we've sleptwalked inch by inch by inch by inch. Things that we would ordinarily, Joe, have been outraged about, like rejected straight up. We've almost become kind of, I don't know how to, I use the frog in the water analogy when you're boiling it up. And obviously don't realise it's dying. And I just think, how has it got to the point where somebody, a councillor or whoever, can say to you, if you want to leave your zone, you've got to apply for a permit?
Oh, I mean, that is, it's horrible. And I think the point that Dominique just made about how companies are trying to monetise this in the name of greenwashing or whatever it is. You know, yes, of course, lots of people buy too much stuff, but the way to stop that is through education and say, actually, you know, it would be much better to use second-hand or recycle or make sure that your clothes that you don't want go to charity shops or get repurposed. There are other ways around it. The same with this. Of course, we need to make our cities much less polluted and much more car-free. I mean, we've been talking about children's health, and, you know, we know, very sadly, from the inquest in the little girl who lived in London, that, you know, the traffic pollution on the road where she lived was directly responsible for her death. But, you know, there are ways of doing it. You actually say, all right, well, we're going to ban cars completely, but all public transport within the city centre.
You can't say you're going to ban cars.
You can't ban cars.
Well, but that is no more extreme. You can say we're going to ban residents having cars.
Oh, see, this is the thing. This is the thing. And this is why I think people that subscribe to the sort of Labour green agenda genuinely are kind of dangerous, if I'm being honest, because you sort of project your idea of what's moral and what's right onto other people and use it as an excuse to take away their rights. Throughout history, that's never ended well. It's ended with authoritarian regimes where millions of people have died. If I want to use a car, I think I should be able to use a car. And I understand, you know, this is the thing. Genuine issues get wrapped up and, like, sort of manipulated, and then they are used to justify extreme measures. I agree that pollution isn't the best thing and we should be making efforts to reduce it, but I do not agree with assigning people to zones, controlling where they can shop, controlling where their kids go to school, and banning them from using cars.
There are other ways to think about it. I mean, this, I think, is too authoritarian.
But then you said you could ban cars.
Well, I'm just saying, look at other things. There are city centres. I mean, I've just come back from Florence a little while ago. There are no private cars in the city. And, you know, the roads are an absolute delight to walk down. Delivery vehicles get in and out. People can drive, you know, during certain periods of the day, but during the daytime, it's, you know, it's pedestrianised.
I don't mind these pedestrianised zones. I actually think they're quite nice, but
they are nice.
as for someone telling me no, you can't have a car. I would literally tell them, on your bike. I think that's one of the problems in society. There's the people that are so-called in charge, you're overstepping your mark a little bit, quite frankly.
But then you get the people who park on pavements and you say, excuse me,
well,
don't
did you see what
park
happened?
there.
Well, did you see what happened to some of those guys? Was it? I want to say it's in Manchester. I don't condone this, by the way.
But I can understand.
Yes.
Fury.
Pavement parkers, if you don't know what we're talking about, a load of people went along to said cars, smashed their windows and spray painted "move" on their bonnets. Don't condone that, of course, but it did make
I've
me
got
chuckle.
a fantastic trick for people.
Well, tell me your trick in the break. Tell me your trick in the break. I've got to go. I've been told off
I
about
want to
4
share this
times.
with everybody.
All right. Listen, you definitely can't go away now. I'm going to come back in 2 minutes. But for nothing else, Jo has got a trick that she wants to unveil and share with the nation. Also, alongside Jo's trick, I want to talk about the royal family. Should the King Charles be meeting the lady that claims racism or not? Are they just bowing to public pressure? And also the strikes. Where do you stand on them over the Christmas period? See you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dubes & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, until 7 o'clock. I do chuckle sometimes at some of your emails, I have to say, but some of them I can't read out because it's only tea time. Anyway, I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight alongside with Dominique Samuels, the writer and the broadcaster, and the political commentator Jo Phillips, who before the break was just talking about, these 15-minute cities, climate lockdowns, all the rest of it, whatever you want to call it. Jo said she's got a trick that she wants to share with the nation. Go on, Jo.
This is about people who... We were talking about pavement parkers.
Oh, yeah,
right?
pavement parkers.
So where I live, outside my house, all along the road, there are signs.
It's got to be a short trick, by the way.
OK.
Yeah.
No parking, no parking, no parking.
Yeah.
Every now and again, you get somebody, they stop there for 5 minutes. It's OK, it's fine. Sometimes you find people park there all day long. So I have discovered that the best thing to do is in your very best handwriting, write on a large piece of paper, there are some very good opticians locally, as you clearly can't read, and then stick it on the windscreen.
That'll tell them.
With marmalade.
Stick it in that criminal damage or something like that.
Doesn't do any damage, but enough make them cross.
Well, so there you go. That is a trick. They do deal with it a little bit harsher, as we've just been saying. I think it was in Manchester. But Jo, she doesn't mess around. She gets a large piece of paper, writes on it, and you can't see, basically, and sticks it with marmalade.
Oh,
I can't remember the last time I've had marmalade.
Well, anything will do. I mean, you can use golden syrup, you can use chutney. Chutney's a bit chunky.
You can see who's middle class on this panel, can't
chutney.
you? Darling, you can use chutney if you've got some available. Oh, yeah, I'll just go into my pantry and I'll take my chutney and I'll smear it all over that windscreen, so I will. That'll tell the Pavement Parkers. Right, that was a good trick. Thanks for sharing. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? King Charles and Queen Camilla have invited the charity worker to go meet them at Buckingham Palace. This is, of course, all about that, you know, the whole racism row where she was asked where she was from and all the rest of it. Anyway, Dominic Samuels, is this what King Charles should be doing with his time, or is this kind of the royals bowing down to pressure?
It is. I feel like the royal family is just really desperate to go woke, and I think that's why they've ultimately bowed down to the mainstream media pressure so quickly by having Lady Hussey resign, the lady who was accused of being racist to Ngozi Fulani, the charity worker who was attending an event, without so much of an investigation, by the way. This sort of thing is sinister, it's concerning, and what's sort of ironic is that the royal family under Charles seems so desperate to sort of pander to these left-wing woke groups that would be very happy to see the royal family not exist. Those that are ardent supporters of the royal family, the ones that I've spoken to anyway, feel really uncomfortable with the way Lady Hussey has been treated. I personally don't think that she's this bigoted racist that she's been painted out to be, and I don't think that she should have been tossed to the wolves like that. At least have an investigation, but she was just bye-bye, and now he's having talks with the woman who caused the whole issue and basically had the media set upon this old woman. I think it's bizarre and cruel, actually.
Do you think it's bizarre and cruel? Do you agree?
No. I think they were damned if they did and damned if they didn't. I mean, the whole thing, unfortunately, is overshadowed. I mean, talk about woke with Harry and Meghan and this ridiculous Netflix series, Yawn Yawn.
But are you going to watch it, though?
No, I am, probably.
No. I mean, I'm so bored with this self-indulgent, narcissistic, me, poor me, poor me, poor me. And I think it's deeply insulting, not just to his father, his brother, his sister-in-law, his late grandmother. It's also insulting to quite a lot of people in this country. I was working in Lambeth when they were engaged, and they came down to Brixton, and the crowds were out at 7 o'clock in the morning queuing to see Meghan, and the welcome that she got could not have been warmer and kinder and full of love. And I just think that the way they've behaved and the way they run this double life of hypocrisy on their climate change, but we're taking private jets. You know, we live in this great big mansion, but we're going to do this, that and the other for charity. You know, all of this guff about empowering women. She could have had a role doing some really good stuff. And the idea that she didn't know what she was marrying into is as bonkers as letting this mug read the news.
Do you think they should keep their titles?
No, I don't think they should keep their titles, but I wrote a column for The Express, it's in the paper today, and I was saying, similar to you, that I think they're actually hypocrites because they claim to be about truth, about love, about inclusivity. Harry and Meghan aren't bothered about all the royal pomp and ceremony, but the reality is that they need the titles in order to remain interesting to the likes of Spotify and Netflix. And in order for them to survive additionally, they need the division, they need the anger. You can see that with the sort of race-inspired, angry, screeching debates that are constantly taking place at home where these two are concerned. They are walking contradictions. And I think that the royal family do sort of need to grow a backbone in this sense, because unless they actually start saying something back, they're going to keep tearing chunks and they're going to continue and continue. I don't think Harry and Meghan are finished with the royal family in any sense of the word.
See, isn't that the point, though, Dominic, with the way that they dealt with Lady Susan Hussey, in a way, is because if they said, we'll have an investigation, there would have been people saying, oh, the royal family's racist, and you're going to get Netflix with Meghan and Harry claiming that, apparently. So they had to do something and condemn it.
So do you think she was a scapegoat, then?
Yeah, she definitely was.
I mean, I wasn't there, you weren't there. All I know is what I have heard from people who were there, including Ngozi Fulani as well, and the people that were there.
Very odd, though, that you can transcribe word for word a conversation.
But even in the conversation that she posted the transcript, it sounded like when Lady Hussey was asking the questions, it sounded like Ngozi was literally on the defence from the get-go. I've been in situations, I've seen it, where someone asks you where you're from, and a lot of ethnic minorities instinctively feel as though they're under attack. So they feel the need to sort of be on the offence. And I think from what she said, I think Lady Hussey probably sensed it and was probably messing with her a bit. That's sort of the impression that I got.
And the trouble is, unless you can hear it and unless you were there, you don't know whether it was said.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure why we keep blasting that thing out there. Sorry.
Good humour or whatever. But Lady Susan Hussey is not your average 83-year-old. She has been around the royal family for many, many decades. She knows how to behave, and she, you know, if you thought somebody was uncomfortable with the way you were talking to them, even if you didn't mean any offence, you should have had enough grace and manners to row back.
Have we even heard from Lady Hussey, by the way?
No, but I should imagine she's got a bit more dignity and she's going to keep her mouth shut.
Yeah, but you see, I find that a real shame because people kind of come out and make these allegations. The world turns against them, and then they don't really get the opportunity to be able to put their side of the story. So it's like this whole Harry and Meghan thing. I mean, if you guys hate the royal family so much, why don't you voluntarily give up your own titles?
And
why
just
don't you
stop
voluntarily go get on with your life and move on? And then the travesty of it is, people are, these, say, Harry and Meghan, they're saying their thing, saying their thing. And then the royal family, because they're dignified and the position that they hold, they don't respond.
I know. So that's what I mean. So they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. And, you know, what was the Queen's maxim? Never complain, never explain. I just think, you know...
Do you think Charles will do an interview, though, off the back of this Netflix thing?
No, I shouldn't think so.
Really?
Well, maybe... I would imagine he'll refer to it in his Christmas message.
Do you?
Yes.
But then didn't he? What did he say in his last message when he was saying he loves his sons and he wishes them all? I mean, I'm...
Yeah, he did talk about it, and I think he said something about families and something. But I'm sure when he does his first King's Christmas message, he will refer to families. The trouble is, you know, we've all got problems. Every family's got problems and schisms and things. But this is so public, and as Dominique says, they're making so much money out of it. That's what's so distasteful. And why don't, you know, and they're only valuable because they're not any longer royal. Exactly. And I think, I mean, I'm sure that we would have a completely different conversation if we were sitting in America. You know,
oh, their fans are insane.
Yeah, and I'm sure the Americans do think, you know, we're an appalling country and we're completely racist and we...
But that's the thing, that's what they've actually helped cultivate, and they know they've helped cultivate that because it fuels their desire for revenge. And, you know, if you are truly about, you know, the charity work, the goodness, the truth, the peace, then your actions should inspire a certain kind of response, but they inspire the opposite.
You know, what do they want apart from money?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I hate my family so much that I'm going to make a fortune talking about them. I mean, it's all very odd to me. If you don't like your family, disown yourself, change your name, get rid of your titles, crack on with your life. You know, you can always get a job. You don't have to... Yeah, there you go. You can make chutney and smear it on the windscreens of the pavement parkers near you. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about strikes. Now, of course, it's rumoured that our Christmas could be disrupted because of strikes. You know, I've got to say, we've had Christmas disrupted a couple of times now, haven't we? Surely it's time to move on from all of that, isn't it? Or do you back the strikers? Do you side with them and think that what they're doing is absolutely justified? Tell me your thoughts and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Coming up on Dan Wouldn't Tonight, are rail unions heartless for trying to destroy our first Christmas of freedom after the pandemic? Plus, Dan will meet the man on a mission to overhaul our broken immigration system, Nick Timothy. There's opinion galore from Kelvin McKenzie and Reform UK's Richard Tice, and top columnist Sarah Vine battles ex-royal butler Paul Burrell over Harry and Meghan misinformation. That's Dan Wouldn't Tonight, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Jubes & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Lots of you writing in about that royal story there. Amy says that Prince William should do a response interview, charge a couple of £1 million for it and donate funds to charity. But really, is that what you want to see? I don't want to see that. I think actually the thought of two brothers, two siblings anyway, I think fighting and arguing and being separated, that makes me incredibly sad actually. And I think that sometimes, I can't remember who said it, but when they go low, you go high. All I have to say, I'm not sure I could bite my tongue so much, and people were saying that much stuff about me.
But
Celia
dignity has got to be better.
Hey, I tell you what, dignity is a rare thing, and it seems to be getting even rarer in today's societies. Celia says, Michelle, all the media should ignore them, and then maybe then they would stop. I can't see that happening though, do you? Can you see the media ignoring them? Although, by the way, if you see the Netflix trailer, half the media shots that they put in there, it's not even the media focusing on them. Did you see that? It's all a bit weird if you ask me. Alan says, Michelle, have you or any of your guests read 1984 by George Orwell? It's all coming true. Is it coming true?
Yeah.
Alan reckons it is.
Well, 1984, yes, some of it is. You know, Brave New World, all of those things, they were very prescient.
Brave New World, stupid New World. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Dominic Samuel, the writer and broadcaster, is alongside me, and the political commentator, Joe Phillips. In case you've just tuned in, you're wondering who you can hear, that's who it is. Right, let's talk ambulance strikes, shall we? Well, strikes generally, because we've touched on this, haven't we? There's lots of strikes, pretty much everyone's striking these days anyway. It's all started to be a lot more coordinated, but now that we're hearing RMT Union will walk out potentially at 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve until the 27th of December, disrupting the travel plans of many over Christmas. Joe Phillips, I've got strong opinions on this, but I know you have. Go on.
Well, they're not going to be disrupting that many travel plans because the trains have always stopped about 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve. There are never any trains running on Christmas Day and very, very few on Boxing Day. What might be disrupted is the engineering work that takes place over the Christmas period. I mean, if we look at the people who are going on strike, people who work on the railways, postmen and women, nurses, ambulance workers, bus drivers and bus staff, highway workers, teachers and baggage handlers. Most of these people are the people that some people were out clapping for during COVID. They're the people who kept going. And most of them have been offered an absolutely appalling pay deal. They've been working for less money. They've seen their real wages, real pay, decrease since 2014. the government are trying to pitch this as something into the 1970s. Because they know that their core audience of the Conservative Party love to go back to the 1970s, and the lazy reporting about union barons and holding the country to ransom.
So what do you think they should give them then, Jo?
I think they should sit down and talk to them.
But they've done that.
And they've offered them 8% over 2 years. So that's 4%. That isn't even half the rate of inflation.
But what do you think they should give them? That's my question.
I think they should talk to them about looking at an inflation-linked pay offer with no redundant or no forced redundancies.
So 10+%.
If necessary.
And no forced redundancies. So you think it's fair for an organisation to not be able to evolve with the times if they need to?
No, I'm not saying that at all. But if you look at the profits that the private... there have been deals done, Michelle. There have been deals done separately. The government is putting the blame on the unions because they're not willing. I mean, up until now, this is the first time that anybody's actually sat down and talked to the RMT. This is the first time in 106 years of its history that the Royal College of Nursing has voted to go on strike. Paramedics and ambulance workers... my son's a paramedic. These people do not take this action lightly. So when you say, or other people say, this is about disrupting Christmas, these people have kept going for years and years and years. And part of the problem is that the organisations that they work for, particularly the National Health, are broken. And they're striking not just about pay, it's about working conditions.
Well, fair play to you, actually, because every time I ask someone, what do you think they should get, they don't seem to be able to give me an answer. So you're saying inflationary pay rise. So you think that every public sector worker, pretty much, and I know this is private sector as well, but the public worker, you think that we can afford 10% plus pay rises for every single public sector?
These are private companies. The Royal Mail...
I know, but you mentioned your son's paramedic. So I'm saying let's park private companies because they can do what they want. I'm asking public sector, 10% plus. Do you think as a country we can afford that?
Let's have a think about how much money we spent on track and trace. £39 billion.
Yeah, appalling.
Not a penny of it has come back. How many billions were spent and given to cronies and mates on the VIP fast track for dodgy PPE and other deals that have not been clawed back? We found the money for that when we needed it. We need to pay these people
we found
for
the money
what
for a
they've
lot of
done.
things when we need it. Dominique, go.
To be honest, I kind of dislike talking about strikes because...
Why?
The whole thing sort of makes me suspicious because I feel as though strikes have been sort of conveniently placed as this really polarising debate where, you know, the left and the right attack each other. You know, your shirkers that want to bring down the government versus, you know, your cruel people that don't believe in one's right to strike. Where I do think there's a middle ground in all of this, and I think that is where I stand, that I acknowledge that some of the pay rises that are being asked for example, I think nurses were asking for 15%.
And then some.
I don't think that is necessarily reasonable, taking into consideration the economic outlook. But at the same time, I do think that our public services and the people that work for things like Royal Mail, I don't think they have actually been treated very well. And it's just a fact that their pay hasn't risen enough in recent years, which is why, at a time of really high inflation, they're saying, actually, enough is enough now. They can't continue.
And the idea that strikers are inconveniencing ordinary people, they are ordinary people.
But the coordinated nature of a lot of this, unions talking to each other, coordinating a lot of these strikes to bring maximum pain to people that are not involved, not caught up. So you're
it's not the only way they can actually be heard, though.
Nobody wants to go on strike, Michelle. Nobody wants to go on strike. They lose money for a start. They have to go through all sorts of hoops. In fact, when on my way here through Westminster, there was a rally of the Fire Brigades Union. And the speaker, I don't know who he was because I wasn't there for the whole thing, but talking about the hoops that they have to go through in order to get a ballot that meets the thing. You know, they're not allowed to vote for a ballot electronically, even though that's how we've ended up with a Prime Minister that we didn't vote for, electronic voting.
Well, something tells me this whole strike conversation will rumble on and on and on because, sadly, because let's face it, whatever side of the argument you're on, no one can deny that actually this is a very sad situation, that all of this is coming to this and that the country is in the state that it's in because ultimately everyone just wants to go to work